Peace, everyone. Peace to everyone. Welcome to MaatSpeaks and welcome to another live stream. I'm so happy to see everyone in the chat. Peace, family. Okay, so we are going to get started here. And if you are new to the channel or if you just need a reminder here at MaatSpeaks, we are aimed to demonstrate how to maintain, uphold, and build a code and culture through the 7 principles of Ma'at. We begin by applying these principles to ourselves, then extend those principles to our families and ultimately our communities. So let's see, who do we have here in the chat before we get started? I want to say hello to everyone. Shout out to Knowledge and Relationships. Peace. Thank you for coming. And as always, Inya, peace, Inya. Thank you for being here. And let's see, Ron P. Thank you for always being here. Peace to you. And let's see, Luminous Body Essentials. Peace. Thank you for being here. Okay, so we're going to get started here. So before we get started, let's see, I just want to do some little, some housekeeping here. There are ways to give to the channel and support what we do here at MaatSpeaks. So we have our Cash App here. There's my Cash App, MaatSpeaks. Also, you can give Venmo, MaatSpeaks, or my PayPal is Gen Health Revolution. And also, you can buy me some tea at buymeacoffee.com/MaatSpeaks. So feel free to donate to the channel. It helps me bring on, like, I have these lovely ladies here and continue to do this. And then also as a holistic health guide, I also have a detox. So if you're in need of a detox this new year, we will be doing a group detox in February, which I'll discuss more during Wellness Fridays. But if you do want to go ahead and purchase that, that's at generationalhealthrevolution.com/detox. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right in here. So remember, family, as you enter, I do ask that you prepare to open your minds. Always on this channel, we want to introduce a different perspective so that we can consciously heal ourselves and name ourselves in a way that is native to who we are. So this channel, MaatSpeaks, was started so that we could help heal ourselves, our community, and build with one another so that we can create a world that our children and future generations do not need to heal from. So the conversation, as you know from the topic of submission, this conversation in general may bring some discomfort, but discomfort helps us grow. So the conversation is aimed to heal our Black community by healing our Black families, and most importantly, our children. They are our future, so that we can build healthy Black families, and a product of healthy Black families are healthy Black children. So let's continue healing. So now I would love to welcome these beautiful ladies and everyone in the chat. Also, I want you to just tell me, just put a word and tell me how to describe your spirit today. I'm going to put my word in the chat. My word of the day is gratitude. So welcome, ladies, and I want you to tell everyone about yourselves. Tell us how you're doing today. What's one word that describes your spirit today, and where we can find you so that we can continue, so that anybody who wants to continue learning more about what you do can learn more about what you do. So whoever wants to go first.
I can probably go first because I'll probably have the shortest intro. I'm not a content creator, so you can find me most likely in the comments section at MaatSpeak or on Omawale Africa's YouTube channel. So, and my name is Awa.
Okay, thank you, Awa. I'm glad that you're here. Peace, sister. I'm glad you joined this conversation today.
Well, hi, my name is Hanifa. I go by Hanifa Nayela on YouTube. My channel is Hanifa Nayela. And my word the word to describe my spirit today is just rest. That's it.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Colette, and my channel is Over the Top WME Wife Mom Entrepreneur, and my channel I talk about everything marriage. Try to give somewhat of a blueprint of marriage. I don't know it all, but I try to make sure I give my advice or tips from my 11 plus years of marriage with my husband. And I believe in building a legacy, and building a legacy, making sure that we are building a strong family structure is one of the ways that we could build a legacy. So that's one of the ways that I talk about building a legacy on my channel. And my, let's see, my, how would you say, how would you describe my spirit today? I guess it will be anxious. Yeah, just anxious, trying to make sure I juggle all things at once right now.
That's understandable. I think we're all kind of juggling some things today. I feel kind of see, there we go. There's my light. I feel kind of out of sorts today for some reason, but I'm getting there. I'm glad to have this conversation though. So so we're going to get started. So before we jump right into talking about submission, I do want to talk about the whole idea. I feel like we can probably retire these words pretty soon, but the whole femininity, masculinity, rest in your femininity. So, ladies, let's talk about that because we hear that a lot. We hear that we need to rest in our femininity. What does that mean? What does it mean to rest in our femininity, or do you believe that that's something that we should do?
First, can you, from your definition, if you could give us what does femininity means?
So, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get there because I think I do have a different perspective of femininity, but I guess if we're using what most people think of femininity to be, it's going to be uh someone who exudes. I mean, I don't know if you want the actual definition, but someone who exudes, in a sense, sexuality, also maybe have a peaceful, calm demeanor. Um, and then, we're going into that whole idea of um, being, that being submissive, who listens, that's the whole idea that we hear a lot about femininity. But of course I do have a different take on it that we will get to. So when you guys hear femininity, or when you hear rest in femininity, what does that mean to you, or do you think that's something that we should be doing?
Okay, I'll answer. So, when I hear, ooh, that's a loaded question, right? So, when I hear femininity, for me, it's definitely something I didn't know there was a title that exists in it. I think I just grew into it because, growing up, especially if you have siblings, you kind of veer off to what your older siblings are doing, especially if you have a lot of boys around and stuff like that. But so I kind of grew into it and not knowing what it was, but like you said, just being that softer side, just not being combative, being warm to everyone, not just men, being I would say definitely making sure that you are just respectable, not trying to live outside of who you are as a woman. So if you enjoy cooking, or you enjoy, certain hobbies, then that is your femininity. That is, you're embracing that, but not in a cold way, I would say. So I guess that's what comes to mind to me. And it's, it could be described in so many different other, abstract ways too. But
Right.
yeah.
So Awa or Hanifa, what do you think about that? Or do you have another definition of femininity?
So when I think of femininity, I'm thinking of someone who is like nurturing, like caring, like supportive. Like I think of all these words that we kind of like attribute to women to have, which I think is all good. But I I don't think that we should just be like, I feel like there's a time and place for everything. Like especially like being in the workplace, like you might have to get aggressive with someone and not really like be concerned about whether they're gonna consider you to be like a B word, or whatever like negative connotations come with appearing masculine or loud. So I think, I don't know. I feel like we should be kind of a little bit of both, like when it's
Right.
required. So like when I'm at home, like obviously I'm like the caring, nurturing um one here, but then like I'm not really trying to leave like my front doorstep being feminine, if that makes
Mm,
sense. And I'm not
okay.
really concerned with how that comes off in the world, because um like I don't know, aggression gets things done. I've learned that. So like whether you're dealing with a customer service rep somewhere, someone giving you a hard time, or like making sure people don't take advantage of you, like you, I don't know. I don't even remember the question. I'm sorry.
So what do you think about the whole idea where you hear a lot of men and
Yes,
who say rest in your femininity?
rest in your femininity. I think that it is very easy to rest in your femininity. This is going to probably not be a popular idea, maybe in this space. It's easy to do that if you have someone who makes you feel safe to be
Mm,
able to do it.
mhm.
Because there is, especially with the type of world that we live in, like it doesn't make sense to me to ask like the most vulnerable group of people in this country,
Mhm.
like half of your counterpart, like, oh, just rest in your femininity.
Right.
Like houseway, we really don't, So yeah, but I think it sounds great. I love it. I'm all for women trying to be more feminine. I like it. I love it. But yeah, just not really.
So Hanifa, what do you think about that?
Um, hmm. Sheesh. Femininity. So the question is, what is femininity to me, right?
Yeah.
So when I think about femininity, I think of collaboration. I think of intuitive. I think of creative. I think of being free spirited, wild, right? I don't know. I think of resting. I think of just being versus doing. Like
Mm,
those are the things that come to mind. But in this space and in these times that we live in, and I don't think it's just these times. I just think that the feminine has kind of been like stigmatized or boxed in to like 3 bullet point things. And it is the bullet points that work in the interest of men. We live in a male dominated society. I am with Awa. I think when we're having this discussion as Black people, I think what needs to be put into perspective is that Black people have never really been able to rest in anything in this country. It is disrespectful as hell, in my opinion, and dangerous, by the way, and dangerous. the way that we have this conversation, because there's, I mean, even Black women, since we're talking about women, I mean, check the history. It's there. It's there. You know, this docileness that men are now talking about and all of that. The only people that had that privilege was white women, because their men are the dominant society and they have all the access to the resources. Of course. If our men had that, then we would be free to do so. So I think femininity means different things to different people and it's expressed differently. And then also femininity is not gendered. It's not a thing that is gendered.
Right.
It is something that exists in both sex. The issue that we have today and the stigmatization and demonization of femininity is because we have a whole bunch of imbalanced men who have suppressed or rejected their own femininity, and it's reflected in how they treat women. That's the society we live in. None of us have been unscathed by this. Everyone has been touched by it, even the woman, right? But I think as Black women, we're aware that we can't afford to be feminine. Like I would say, you step outside, you just can't afford to be your feminine 24/7. We do not have that luxury. But when I think about femininity, I do not think about femininity as assigned to one particular gender. I do not think of it as in a gendered sense. I think of it as an energy that exists within all of us, that we dance between masculine and feminine throughout our day, second by second, moment by moment. We are
Right.
constantly going in and out of those energies. So yeah, I mean, but femininity itself as expressed, I think about creativity, I think about intuitiveness, I think about just learning how to be, right? That grind and all of that, that's even when you see women grinding like that, that's them tapping into their masculine energy. I don't care how much they try to deny that. It is what it is. So one time, and I'm gonna stop here. I had mentioned this online, and a friend of mine was like, "Well, why does competition have to be masculine?" And I was like, "See, the reason why you're even asking that question is because you think masculinity solely belongs to men, and so you feel offended by what I just said because maybe you are competitive. It doesn't change the fact that it is masculine. What needs to change is your idea around what masculinity and femininity means." So yeah.
Facts. Yes. So I mean, because when we think about even what happens in nature, what's happening in our bodies, like they even talk about our brain, like our brain, um, being one part being that masculine energy, one part being the feminine energy. So this is always existing within us, those energies, and learning how to balance those energies. So when I think of even when I think of kind of the most feminine thing to do, I think that my opinion, the most feminine thing to do is to give birth. But that's not something that is always calm and peaceful and passive. That can right, like it can be really
Mary messed that up for us.
so when I hear that whole concept of feminine energy being docile or being passive or being quiet, I think that it's a very what is the word I'm looking for? But it's something that is basically showing that we really don't know what femininity and masculinity is. And then on top of that, we have the opposite sex telling each other how they want the other person to be. So you have men telling women how to be feminine, and you have women telling men how to be masculine. And what in turn happens is because they're wanting something from whether it's they see an image in the entertainment, whether they might the perception that they see in somebody's relationship, whatever it may be. But then it to me it ends up being a toxic representation as opposed to being that balanced representation. So what do you think happens or um what is happening when you are telling the opposite sex how to be? So as far as if a man is telling a woman how to be feminine, or if a woman is telling a man how to be masculine, what happens within that? And anybody can.
Do you mean like what does it mean when we're asking someone to either act feminine? Like what does it
Yeah,
mean? Like what does it imply or
yeah. So what is that applying to to when we're doing those things? What is that? What is happening there? So is that in turn creating a toxic image for the other
okay.
sex, basically?
So I kind of look at it as like you're just projecting your idea of what it means to you on that person. Um, and that I mean, I think because of the word projection, I think it would be safe to kind of say that that could be toxic. Um, but I also think it depends on who the two parties are. So like if you're dating someone, like let's say like you're on a first date and you feel the need to either like dissect or like come to the conclusion that like this man across from you is like too feminine or acting feminine or not masculine enough. I kind of just look at that as like you should just kind of take that as a sign that you're not compatible, because if you have to like question that up front, then it's probably not worth, like they're probably not going to be for you, or they're not going to give you what you need from a mate or what you expect to receive from a mate, right? So in that instance, I would probably, suggest like don't ask or don't bring it up, and just, like cut your losses and move on. Like this is not going to be the person for you. That would be like the least toxic thing to do, instead of pursuing a relationship and then finding yourself later down the line where you're like, cursing him out because you're like, oh, you're acting like a bitch or whatever, which is toxic, right?
Right.
So, but if you're like already, I don't know, like married or, I think it basically means like you have work to do. Like it's something that definitely needs to be analyzed. Like, why do you feel this way? Like, what is your idea of what it means to be masculine or feminine? Like, I feel like a real conversation needs to be had with like a real like conclusion needs to be gotten to. So.
Yeah, because I think in relationships, right? Like we have desires, like we might have desires within that relationship, but I think it's gotten to the extreme where men and women are literally telling each other what they need to be, and so I understand having desires. So you might want a man who has lots of muscles, and that might be your definition of masculinity. But that's different. Yeah, that's like something that's an outward thing, but that does not necessarily mean that if there's a man without muscles that he's not masculine as well. So it's now we have all of these criterias that are saying that this is what it means for a man to be masculine, this is what it means for a woman to be feminine, and if we don't match those things, then we're not feminine, or we're not, or that man is not masculine. So Colette or Hanifa, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so what I would say is just to piggyback on what Awa was saying. First of all, I don't think something is wrong with you telling someone if they are acting out of a certain character, but it's how you say it. Like I wouldn't say to another man, "You're acting feminine." Like that's pretty disrespectful. However, I will give you an example. If the person is pretty, let's say they are getting irate about certain things, that doesn't require them to be irate about certain things. Just be so. I would say you're being a little too emotional, But for and that's not even something I would say on a first date. That will be something more of a critique you will say to someone who you understand that you have a rapport with, so they could see that you're not coming from a negative place, right?
Mm.
Because it's not like we still need to hear certain critiques about each other that we might have. So I don't think it's a bad thing if you see certain characteristics about that person that might be exuding femininity, but you're probably wording it in a different way, maybe being more specific in how that person is acting. And the other thing is yes, we definitely do, especially our culture, definitely do try to pass on like how we feel each gender should be acting, as if we have we have the title or the degree in knowing how each gender should be acting, right? Like we don't have that. We don't hold that. But we do hold some, at least some kind of standards, right? Like we could see how maybe some women may be exuding a little bit too much aggression, and how some men may be exuding a little bit too much femininity, right? As you said, and as Hanifa said, that there is a balance. Like we all have femininity and masculinity in us. However, some project a little more than they should. So if we let it keep going and not saying something to someone, especially if we care about them and we have a good rapport with them, then what good are we doing? I mean, we should critique if we have a good rapport with that person. Yeah, and then the last thing I want to say is I was said something about sometimes we do have to be aggressive, and I would word it more so of is more assertive. Like and she said something about talking to customer service. Like I wouldn't be aggressive, but I would be more assertive if I feel that I need to drive my point across a little bit clearer to that person. I would not lose any be disrespectful or anything like that. I hope not. But I would be more assertive. Maybe my tone would change more, and maybe the words I would use would be a little bit more definite. But assertive is what comes to mind, but not aggressive. But I understand what you said. It's just that I would probably just switch it out for myself.
No, and I can definitely see that. I agree. I think I also meant assertive, because when I say aggressive, I don't think aggression has to be disrespectful, or it doesn't have to come with disrespect. I'm thinking of it in the terms of like a mama bear type of situation, like you go into like protection mode. But I definitely understand what you mean and agree with what you just said. But the other thing too that I just wanted to say based on what I just heard, I don't necessarily want to, like, if a man is being emotional, I don't think we should consider that being feminine, right? Because there is like a stereotype that we don't allow men to like have emotions and things, and I think that that's dangerous because you should be allowed to express your emotions. What I normally find with whether it's a man or a woman who reacts like emotionally, especially to something like that's like not inconsequential, but maybe like just not like doesn't warrant that level of reaction. What I normally find is there's either a lack of immaturity or there's a trigger for an underlying something that is just not known. So if we like, took the time to like assess like why did this make me feel this way? Like what is it that triggered me to react this way? Then I feel
Right.
like that's something that would be better addressed, but we don't really take time to learn our triggers.
Right. And I agree, definitely. We don't give them that space so they could be emotional, right? I agree in that. But I actually said too emotional. And I do think there is a balance in it. Okay, especially when we're speaking about men. Like there's certain times where we need you to put on that, poker face. you know, and not let's say for example, I'm just better with examples. For example, if someone, you know, you lose your house or something like that and the lights are cut off, like I don't want to look towards my husband and he's over there crying every day. Like, okay, cry the first day, the second day you're still feeling down, the third day we need to come together and come up with a plan and execute it. But you cannot be crying 3 days in a row. Like, you are the provider and the protector. So at some point in time, I'm going to give you that time to whatever happened to why we lost the house and the lights are cut off, whatever. Okay, you're feeling emotional about that. But now this is where your masculinity needs to kick in, probably the third day or such and such for. But I'm just making up days. I'm not saying that, oh my gosh, only give them 3 days.
No, I mean, you're far more generous than me, because I feel like,
So my question with that, are you, do we think that emotions are feminine? Are having too many emotions feminine?
From a man, yeah, like I said, if it's too much, and that's why I said the 3 day, not saying, you know, just to give an example, like at some point in time where your masculinity should kick in. And that's why I said the part about if your lights are off, if you're, you know how there now you're homeless, that is the job of a man to provide and protect, not a woman. So therefore, I'm depending on your masculinity to kick in a little sooner than mine, right? Because I'm gonna be pretty emotional. I'm gonna probably be more emotional than you, but that was your job. So I need you to get it together right now.
Hanifa, so what do you think? Or tell me, are emotions like having too many emotions, is that feminine?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's very interesting that we can look at men being quote unquote too emotional as unhealthy, but not too being, what is it, too feminine as unhealthy. But we don't understand how unhealthy too masculine is as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
still imbalance. There's still an imbalance, period. You know what I'm saying? But we have our biases because we as women, and I have it too, as unconventional as I am in my thinking around femininity and masculinity, I still have residual stuff. I still have stuff that I have to like unpack within myself as far as how I perceive men, right? And it's very important that I do that work because I have two boys, right? That I am a mother to. It's very important. So here's what I want. You asked the question about projection. When we telling men this is how they should be, or men telling women this is how they should be. Again, I still say we are conflating the two energies with sex and gender. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I feel about that. The I don't think that what we're trying to describe to each other is necessarily femininity and masculinity. I think it's manhood and womanhood, and there is a difference. Even though we conflate the two, don't
Mm-hmm.
get me wrong, but there's a differentiation, right?
Right.
And then when we talk about too much, I think that is how can I say it? It has to be considered within its context. If your man lost his mother, a child, you don't get to tell him when to get over that hurt. Now, if you are the stronger person, because this is what collaboration and working in harmony is about. If you are the stronger one in that moment, because maybe you are not as heavily emotionally invested in that individual, then step up. Then step up. It's not going to take anything away from you as a woman. And this is where I get frustrated with us, because I think we are harming each other, right? With these very rigid idea around how we see each other as men and women, to where it's like, well, no, because that's what you're supposed to do. So, I'm giving you a week to process that, baby boy. You know what I'm saying? but men have been socialized like that all their lives anyway, right? And just how their socialization affects us and how we work with them and how we perceive them and how we interact with them, and our socialization also affects them and how they see us and how they interact with us as well, and it seeps over into how we do relationships. So no, I do not think, I think that when we say too much, it has to be considered within its context. What is going on? You know what I'm saying? What is going on? What happened? You know, yeah. So that's that. And then the other thing is, I feel like specifically as Black people existing in this white dominated society, white male dominated society, that does not allow us for the full expression, okay, or full spectrum of our emotions, right? I was processing this while I was resting, and I was thinking about how many Black women are suffering with all sorts of diseases within their bodies, right? Simply from being afraid of being perceived as the angry Black woman. So there is emotions that is being held back. There's expression. There are things that need to be said that cannot be said because of fear of being perceived as angry, right? I had to process that. So we are not allowed our full spectrum of emotions, and then we then do that to each other. I can't subscribe to that, because I'm perpetuating, right? I'm perpetuating white male domination onto my partner, onto my friends, onto my family. And no, I believe that if we're going to find safe space anywhere in this society, for goodness sake, in this world, it has to be among ourselves. So a lot of the stuff that we've internalized, we have to begin to undo those things and provide spaces. Yes, we should provide spaces for men to cry. Is it going to happen? Probably not, because they're socialized a certain type of way. But for those who do want to, we have to provide safe spaces for that to happen, because a lot of our men are suffering inside. The suicide rate amongst Black men is entirely too blasted high for us to be out here talking about, nah, you doing too much emotional expression. We can't have that. Are you kidding me right now? I can't subscribe to it. So no, my answer to that is absolutely no. And the last thing is, we have the fear of being seen as angry Black woman, us, and then our men have the fear of being seen as weak. And if they're afraid of being weak in this world, right? But there's an expression that needs to be, there's something that needs to be expressed. They need to be able to come among us and do that. I'm advocating for them to be able to even do it among each other as men. You know what I'm saying? So I'm very funny with that. But I still even have residual stuff, because sometimes, like Colette was talking about, I might be like, nah, like, you shouldn't be doing that as a man. Like, this is what you should. I still have those thoughts. I still have those reactions, and I have to constantly check it. It's a daily work, and I think it's actually a forever work, because none of us, we are living in this society. It's male dominated. You know what I mean? So, and then lastly, the fair now, Black women have taken on this new fair. So there's a lot of performative femininity happening. Very forced, very aesthetic base, very, because there's this fear of, I don't want to be seen as masculine. And this idea of Black woman being seen as masculine is old as hell. This is not something new. Go check your archives, right? Go check the literature that was being written back then, prior to slavery, during slavery, after slavery. Go check it. Go check the archives. It's Black woman bodies, Black woman tone, how Black women express themselves has always been policed. But now what's happening is that our own men are doing it.
Yeah.
And that's where I have an issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can just piggyback on, completely, agree with everything you just said. I think that fear like anyone who's operating in fear in any aspect is going to be like a hindrance to you, right? Like if you're so like for me, for example, like when I said sometimes you have to be aggressive, I like you can look at me as the angry black woman, doesn't bother me, right? Because I'm looking at it as what are my objectives? Has these objectives been met? Yes, then I've done my job. Like I feel like and then like for men, if you're, you know, if your fear is to look weak, then that's also going to be a disservice to you, because then you can't actually like you can't operate in fear on any level is basically what I'm trying to say. Like anytime you're operating in fear, you're operating at deficiency and you're not going to be able to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to get. So I just want to add that.
Yeah, so just speaking on what both of y'all are saying, and then thinking about how we are in this white / male dominated society, I think we're not discussing that the way that we view our, or how we're even operating, how we're even trying to operate in our families, in our relationships, raising our children, is in this very Eurocentric, it's a Eurocentric white view. It's not something that is really in our nature. It's just very Eurocentric. So I think that is really the conversation that we have to have at some point, because it is not even it's based off of, we're seeing through their eyes. We're trying to raise our children like they're raising their children. We're trying to treat each other like they're treating one another. We're trying to, and then our men are trying to tell us that whole concept of, well, all of these other races of women are more submissive or more feminine. And so then it's like we try to be copies of copies, because when you see a lot of times the women are trying to be like black women, and then we're trying to be like the Eurocentric version of black women. So it's and that's insanity for one. But it's something that we have to get past and talk about, and understand that it's not even your version of the black, our version of a black family. It's like a white family or white relationships, and then you're like throwing paint on it. So let's start talking about just submission. So I want to define what submission actually is. So let's look at the word submission. All right, so we have the Google definition of submission as the action or fact of accepting or yielding to a superior force or to the will or authority of another person. And then when we look at the etymology of submission, which came onto the scene late 14th century, so if you want to do the math there. So that's the act of referring to a third party for judgment or decision. So it's from Old French submission, a lowering, a letting down, a sinking, to let down, put down, lower, reduce, yield. So when I think of submission, I actually think of reducing, like I think of a reducing of myself. That's what the actual word. Now we can talk about the particulars of what everyone else thinks what submission is. But when I think words have power, I think words are very important. So when we see this word submission, and we look at the definition, and we even think of the etymology of submission, what comes to mind? What do you think when you see this word submission?
Weakness. I think of slavery when I think of submission, if I'm going to be frank. Maybe I should go last, because I don't want to be like the problematic one here.
No, you're not problematic. I don't like the word. So I'll just go out and say I don't like the word submission.
Yeah,
I think there are better words to use. I don't think submission is a word that I would ever use to describe my relationship. But I just so what Colette, Hanifa, what do you think of the word submission?
I definitely want y'all to go first because we're not going to agree. And I'm good with that. Please go first.
Why are we scared?
My aunt set me up. See, she saw my videos, and I did a video of this very word. So this is a setup. I got you, my aunt. I got you.
You get like the Cliff Notes version of what you had said in your videos. No, I want to
Oh, I'm gonna
know.
tell it all, but I want to hear what y'all say. Go on, go on. I'm gonna bring out my masculinity.
Okay.
Balance. You have to have both. My eyes.
So based on the definition, what comes to mind is domination, mainly because it talks about yielding to a superior force. That superior force, I can't shake that. I just can't shake it, shake it. And it breeds like the young people that say it's giving me male superiority. And if we're more specific, yeah, male superiority, male worship, male superiority, and domination is what comes to mind. And I'm with you, Ma'at. I think there's a better word to describe what people do in relationships. I think that submission, as we understand it today, is very much connected to conquest. And we've just taken it on, you know what I'm saying? Specifically as men. But yes, what comes to mind is male centeredness, male worship, male superiority, female subjugation, and female domination. That's it.
All right, I'm gonna type this down. Colette. She said,
Awa is next. You thought I wasn't gonna. You thought you was gonna get away, huh?
You're on mute.
It would be nice if I unmuted. Okay, so I've always had like a anti-authorityness about me. I don't know if you guys are like into astrology, but I'm a Sagittarius, and like I do the dominating, right? Like I can't be dominated, like not willingly, right? So I don't. I think because of that, right? Like I just like, especially like how we use the word now, like in this new like Kevin Samuels days of age. I'm against it. So I just back in like I want to say 2017, 2018, I remember one of my Facebook friends like wrote this like really elegant post where he says something to the effect of like black men who would ask like a black woman to be submissive is both a coward and like a danger to our community, right? And I felt that. And so like because if you think about it, like given like the precarious nature of our status in this country, right? We can't afford to have like one half of our population just going out here like willingly just like giving up all power and control and being submissive. It's not good for our mental health, I think. Like it wouldn't you know, like I feel like submission is part of the reason why, like, we're still kind of where we are now. Like, we need to like bump submission. Like, let's try domination and see what happens. Like, let's see if we can tap into our dominance. Like, you know, we're already like, I mean, this is probably, I don't know if there's like a problematic like somewhere. If we're thinking in terms of like strength, right? Like, one of the main reason why the Urugu felt the need to go all the way to Africa to bring people over here for labor is because when they got here, the people that were already here were like dying like fleas. Like, they weren't strong enough to sustain the physical toll that they were putting on them, right? So, like, we gotta go get stronger people. Like, we are literally the strongest people on the planet. To ask us to be like submissive, like mentally, I think is dangerous for us. So,
Well, can I say something to that?
sure.
So, even though I think it's a word that we might need to just burn and shed its ashes in the abyss somewhere, I also do understand it, but I understand it when it's mutual. I do not subscribe to one sided submission. That's where I draw the line because, again, that has to do, to me, with male centeredness, male worship, male superiority. Men are just better at leading than women. Even the idea of leadership in homes or families, I actually think that we go in between those just like we do feminine and masculine energies, but we don't want to talk about it because
We
why
have to.
we live in a male dominated society, and no one wants to step on the toes of the men. Okay, but we do it whether we accept it or not. So I don't necessarily, I think if submission is mutual, where there's a point where there's something that happened and this woman needs to step up, that man submits to her because her leadership is stronger in that department or within that context. I can
Yes.
get with that, and vice versa. A woman submitting and saying, hey, you just better at this, so we're going to go with your lead, we're going to go with your wisdom, we're going to go with your knowledge because I
Right.
trust, right, that you are definitely more um um you're more equipped to lead us in this time, in this moment, within this context, right? I think it's ridiculous to put the sole burden of leadership on one person in a relationship. It's crazy. Okay, and it creates burnout, and I think it leads to a whole lot of other things. And I'm going to say this, and this is probably going to sound terrible as hell. I actually think that's why so many men step out, because it's an escape. I'm not justifying it, I'm just putting it within context. When you talk to men, a lot of times, I'm not talking about men who are like cheaters, just can't keep their zippers up. I'm talking about men who cheated and then they're working on their marriages or whatever. You have that conversation. It's like it was just an escape. And I'm not saying that women don't get tired too. I'm saying that when you have that burden of provide no matter what, okay, just provide, and then there's the economic piece of it, and how much black people are making in this country, black men in particular. Okay, where it's like, okay, well, you know what, you got to lead, and you got to cover all the bills, and I'm like, what, this is so unrealistic, it's so slightly retarded, you know what I mean, if you ask me. But mutual mutual submission, I could get with that. It's when it's one-sided, and when we discuss it, it usually is very one-sided.
That's what I was gonna say. So, like, I feel like every time we're having the submission discussion, we're talking about like in the biblical sense, like women submitting to men, right? But like, it's just not reality. Like, in real life, a part of what makes like a successful marriage, for example, is being good at problem solving together, right? Like, any type of problem that comes, there's one of you who would be who would have the knowledge or the background or whatever to be able to solve that problem, and then that's who would be like, you know, responsible for coming up with a solution for this problem. If you're going to say, because the way that I look at it, like if I'm going to be submissive, that means I'm just going to leave everything up to you, right? Like whether we sink or swim is going to be solely dependent on you. I don't think the men who are asking for this understand what it would do to their physical and mental health if they had to be solely responsible for the entire outcome of a entire family. Like it's not even realistic, and it's not something that like our ancestors did. Like pre-colonial Africans did not like just submit to the men and allowed them to do everything. Like everything was communal, you know, like if this is your strength, that's what you do. If this is your strength, that's what you do. And we don't judge anyone for, you know, doing whatever. Like if you're a man who can cook, you should cook in the house, and it shouldn't be looked at as you're being feminine or you're being weak because you're doing something that we in this society relegate to be like for the women's job, you know. So but I really want to hear what Sister Colette.
So before Colette goes, I do want to address Arshawn real quick. So he said, what aspect of your psyche is pressed upon by the word submission? Is it purely ego? Is this an ego battle? So Arshawn, I want you to look at these words, right? Like look at these words. And just imagine, not even, let's take man and woman out. Just imagine that it says submission to white men. Let's just say that's what it was. And it said yielding to a superior force, lowering, letting down, sinking, to let down, put down, lower, reduce, yield. So imagine just those words being put in that aspect. Would you not then have an issue with those words? I think that when we have this conversation, we kind of have it in a way where it's like, oh, well, yeah, men are superior than women. I was listening to a conversation I think it was yesterday, another content creator, and there's this conversation that happens, and I think it happens in the manosphere, I guess. I don't really know, but it said that women have to depend on women need men, but men don't need women. So there's this whole concept of women need men, but men can just, I guess, be on the planet without women. I guess I don't know who's gonna have the babies, but that's that whole concept. So it's not necessarily, for me, it's not an ego thing. It's more of words having power. Now the other ladies can say what they feel about it, but it's more of these words have power, and you're saying that I have to reduce myself. You're saying that I have to lower myself. You're saying that you're a superior force. We're not talking about strength. I understand men having strength, which women have a different kind of strength, right? We're talking about, you're saying that we are a lesser species in a sense, and that because of that, we have to reduce ourselves for that. And that does, just like Awa says, that does something to our psyche. If you constantly, it would do something to your psyche. It did something to our psyche to put us in a submissive state. As Black people, that did something to us to be submissive to white people. That did something to our psyche. So that, I hope that answers your question from my perspective. Anybody can chime in if they want to, or Colette can, go from here.
Okay. All right. So, so submission. I know this is a cuss word, right? Oh my gosh. It's a cuss word. First of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that you guys did get to the root of it, knowing that it does come from hearing that in our culture, especially from us, in our culture, it does trigger a lot of things because it does root from a lot of things, right, that we've been through. So I want to acknowledge that is definitely why it comes off as if it is a cuss word. However, I want to say it comes from, if we will educate ourselves a little bit more on especially this word, we will see that it's not a cuss word. For example, in Ephesians 5:2. I'm not a Bible scholar or anything like that, but in Ephesians 5:2 says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another. And in the Bible, it actually talks a little more about submission from the men's side as well. So the problem is, in this society now, you're correct. They are coming from the standpoint of a woman should be submitting, a woman, and not the man. And they are wrong. So that's why educating ourselves in this word is very important. Also, these women, even older than my generation, have been submitting to the wrong men, and also not submitting in the right form. One of the wrong form is having their child out of wedlock, just giving them kids and not demanding them to marry them first. Make sure they are a provider and protector first. So that is the wrong form of submitting. We are submitting to the wrong men and not making sure that they understand as men what is their duties to do as submitting to us as well, because they are supposed to submit to us. And the rhetoric that is thrown around is, if you are docile, you're weak. Now, if we go back to the definition, and it says yield to authority, yield to a higher power. And I believe Hanifa touched on it. If someone else, if your husband is more knowledgeable and stronger or wiser in a certain aspect of your relationship, you're not downing yourself, you're not lowering yourself, you're resting in yourself and knowing that he's got this. He's got this. He performs better than I do in this situation. My husband performs better in going out and working 2-3 jobs. He performs better in that. I don't do that. As so many times I have to tell him, can you just rest? Because I'm thinking like I would rest if I was you. But he performs better in that way. So I yield to him to do that. Now, is there other ways that I help to make sure I wouldn't say provide, but help make sure that when he brings home that money, that I help make sure that it is dispersed in the right way? Yes, that's my power that I have. That's not his power, so he can't submit to me in that form. So there is a balance to it, and that's the part that people don't talk about. They don't talk about that part, and it's not losing your power. It's not losing your power, because we cannot have two drivers. There has to be someone who could sit in the front seat and say, hey, you could turn left, or you could turn there. Oh, there's a car coming this way. There's a car coming that way. There has to be someone who could do that. Is to say that that person always sits in the passenger seats for all situations? No. And that's the part of submission people don't talk about. So when I think of submission, I feel I rest in going back to this, I rest in my femininity. I rest in my knowing that I'm not going to toggle with you. I'm not going to go back and forth with you. I don't have to put on my masculine, side to show you that I'm on the same level as you. I don't want to be the same level as you in everything. You have a hierarchy in things, and I have a hierarchy in certain things. But when it comes to who is supposed to outperform who, then we yield to that person. And there's nothing wrong with that, because if both of us are saying, well, oh, I could provide too, and you could provide too, I could do the same thing you could do, I could do the same thing you could do, there's no balance in that. There's no harmony. It's just not. And that is another reason why a lot, women are not being able to get married to that man who says that, you know what, I'll take care of you. You don't have to go out there and fight traffic. You don't have to go out there and work two, 3 jobs. If you want to stay at home with the kids and pursue a career on your time, you could do that. You can do that. But the other side to it is there many men that are, is there a lot of men that are providing that are offering that? No. So then it comes to the part of the women feeling like, well, I have to, you know, I cannot submit to him because he's not going to be able to do the things that I need him to do. So there comes the imbalance. It's an imbalance.
Because a lot of men can't, especially black men. A lot of men can't, how can I say, Colette, provide in that capacity right now. That's just the reality.
I disagree. I disagree because I feel that our society, we want too much. And if we say to each other, you need to downsize, or you need to not have that extra whatever that you're buying, they cannot fathom that. Because if we say that, okay, if you make $40,000, and this was going through my head because I was on another panel, and they were talking about how hard it is, especially for our culture. That's what I'm talking about, especially for our culture, to not have a 2-income household. And I said, it's absolutely not true. Is it hard? Is it hard? Yes, at the beginning, there's sacrifice, because I've been through it. There's sacrifice. Yes, it's sacrifice. And it all comes down to what is your bigger goal that you're trying to achieve. If it's not to make sure that you are the one who are rearing your kids and raising your kids yourself, then yes, go out and you bring in that extra income outside of the household. But now, if you want to be able to stay at home and he goes out and work 2 and 3 jobs, now that's the other thing. How many men want to go out there? If you're making $40,000 at one job, how many men out there who wants to say, you know what, I'm going to go out there and work another 3rd job? How many men are wanting to do that? That's the other thing.
How much time are you spending with your children?
How much time are you spending with your children?
If you have 3 jobs, realistically, it's a 24-hour day. It's a 24-hour day. How much time is that man able to spend with his children? If we're being realistic, we're talking 2-3 jobs here.
Right.
Let's be realistic. So let me finish. So when I say, I agree with you, Colette. I actually think that a lot of our men don't want to make the sacrifices, right? I agree with that to a certain extent. But I also think that there's a lot of them that's coming to the table with a lot of baggage already. And they're trying to figure out whether it's a record from being in jail. I mean, there's a ton of things I could think of. Not having the proper education, maybe not even a high school diploma. Like, these are everyday men, okay? Mm-hmm. Yes, they can start a business. And this idea of everybody being an entrepreneur is bullshit. It just is. And I wish that we would stop pushing that on Black people all the time. Like, everyone is not built to have their own business in that capacity. And I'm talking about a business that is profitable. That's just the reality. So I'm talking about a certain demographic of men who tend to be marginalized in these conversations. Someone has to speak up for them. Because when we're talking in echo chambers, we're talking amongst ourselves. It's a very classist conversation oftentimes. And I'm saying to you, there are everyday men who don't have the education, the skill set. Can they go and acquire it? Yes, they can. That also takes time, but they're still dating. They're still getting married. They're still having children. And so you ask a man to work 3 jobs. Here's my thing.
Here's what I think. I'd rather make the sacrifice, like you said. I'd rather make the sacrifice, and the man, the male energy is present in my home. I'd rather downsize, like you said, than ask my guy to work 3 jobs because my children will not see him. And the responsibility of parenting should never fall solely on us, ever. Because there is an important role of fathers in their children's lives. And I'm going to let you speak. I'm going to speak to what Arshawn said. Here's my response to that, right? Everything is not a trigger. Some things are just bullshit. And we respond to it accordingly. Everything is not about ego or trigger. It's just dumb. Like, I'm just being, I'm sorry, y'all. I've been sick for a while. I'm sorry.
Good.
I'm just saying. So, Colette, you can go ahead and respond. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So, and what you're saying is working 3 jobs, not being able to see the kids. That's not the solution that I say. And I feel passionate about this is because I live this. I live this. Now, like I said, I do better on examples. So let me paint the picture for you. Before my husband and I decided to have kids, there was a discussion of what our lifestyle would look like with kids. So therefore, how do you want to live? How is it that you want to raise the kids? Do you want to have the kids in private school, the public school? Do you want to be at home with the kids? Do you want to start your business? All these things were discussed, right? Which is what is missing in our culture as well. So, and we go off and making all these kids, and then we just decide that, okay, well, we'll figure it out later. So let's not forget that part, right? But there was a discussion made. Now, when my husband and I first started out, he did not make as much money as he makes now. What happened was I kept working, and I was the person who saved for the family. I was the person who saved for the family, and I made sure, whatever he brought in was to pay the bills. So it was there was a plan in place, right? So it was discussed. After you have kids, if you want to go back to work, you could go back to work. If you don't, you have the choice of making sure that you could stay home with the kids for as long as you like and still pursue what you want to pursue. Now, was I able to go and get my nails done, hair done, did this, and go on trips and all that stuff? No, it was the bare minimum, because I made sure that whatever I worked prior to having our kids, that was saved. So it was planned as well, which is what is missing from our community, right? That's the first thing. The second thing was, after my child became 2 years old and she was able to go to, they're called Mother's Morning now. It's only a few hours for a couple times of the week. That was a time that I was able to go back to work and bring in some extra income for the household. Thank God at that moment, that pressure wasn't on me. My husband went ahead and got a third, actually, it was a second job. He just made sure he was from part-time to full-time. So the schedule was still discussed. Are you going to be able to pick up our daughter at this and this time? It was still discussed, planned. Okay, you're not going to be here to take her to school in the morning, or you're going to be here to tuck her in. Are you going to be here on the weekends? Are you going to be here to take her to soccer, and so on and so forth? So there is a plan put in place, but it's also a sacrifice as well. And that's what I'm saying. Our community, or in this generation, I'm not even going to say just our community, but in this generation period, does not want to do that sacrifice. It does not want to do that planning, right? We distinctly decided no more kids, because the way we would like to raise 2 kids will not be able to afford the same lifestyle of a 3rd kid, and so on and so forth. So those are the hard conversations that our community is not having as well. So are we going to, when you say that, are we going to be realistic? If we're going to be realistic, we need to have these tough conversations before we are shacking up and doing all the other grown-up things. right? We need to have these conversations. Are you willing to work 2 jobs? Are you willing to work 2 jobs? No, I'm not willing to work 2 jobs. Okay, then, well, we probably just can't have kids. Or are you willing for me to go out and work 2 jobs and you stay at home with the kids? Okay, well, I'll do that. Have the conversations, but it is very doable. And if it means that you have to move from a different state that is a higher cost of living, then do so. That's what I mean. It is a sacrifice. If it means that you have to go down to 1 car, it's a sacrifice. If it means that you cannot go out to eat uh, every month or whatever, it's a sacrifice, because the most important thing to me is making sure that my kids are raised properly. And raising them properly is, yes, you are correct, Hanifa, is making sure the father is in the household and present in the household. So that definitely needs to be in the plan as well. And I 100% would agree with you, but it cannot happen without conversation and sacrifice.
I agree with you, Colette. I am not, my addition or adding to what you're saying, it is not a but, it's an and. I'm just saying that it's a little bit more of a nuanced conversation. It is not that black and white always for everyone. It just isn't. It just isn't. And I agree with you. Here's the thing. Would you suggest, and you answered it, that's always like, that's what I was wondering, because I was going to ask you, would you suggest moving as a sacrifice? And you said, even if you have to. The reality is that everyone don't have the luxury. Some people's support system is their family. Their babysitters is their grandmother who lives up the street. Like, this is not as black and white as we are trying to discuss it. It's very nuanced. And all I'm doing is adding to the conversation and saying there are some factors that must be considered when having these conversations. I can't push back on you as far as preparedness, having being proactive, having conversations prior, right? What is it that you want in a marriage, in a relationship, right, with that person? What is it that you want? Stating those things up front so that that person know what your expectations are of them, and you know what their expectations are of you. So there's no pushback in that department at all. How can I? I agree with you. That's an issue that we have within the Black community. I'm just adding the nuance that we often take out of the conversations. You get what I'm saying? Because we have maybe a couple of experiences. I've been around people. I stayed at home. You know, I know what that is. I'm at home right now. So I know what it means as far as sacrifice and all of that. I get it. I had to go back to work at one point. So I know exactly what you're saying. A lot of women don't want to make the sacrifice because they have this fantasy around what them, or this vision of what around what their marriage look like. Also, some women just don't want to stay home with their children, and I honestly don't think that make them bad people. Honestly, some people, their relief is in the office getting away from their children. That's just a fact. I've worked with enough of those women. Do I judge them? No. But do I think the ideal is for you to be home with your children? That's where you and I will always see eye to eye, Colette. I agree. It's better for a parent to be at home with their child. But I still stand on the idea of, and that's from my experience around a lot of women who have daddy issues, but was raised in two-parent household. That's the thing. Why?
Yeah.
Why? You get what I'm saying? And so when I talk about absence, the absent dad, people think that you're just talking about absent dad that weren't in the home. They are dads whose presence was absent in the homes that they live in. And that's a part of it, because they were the sole providers and they had to make ends meet. And so all of the responsibility and what's happened now, we have these adult women dealing with what? Daddy issues. I think we need to actually have a conversation and actually begin to reimagine this whole parenting dynamic. And that's the part that of submission that I think is detrimental as well. Because when you start talking about one person being higher than superior, or the responsibility falling on that person solely, it actually puts
the burden of child rearing on one person, and not having two parents and yet they live in the same household. That's detrimental. I've seen it. I have friends that be like, I don't even know why my mother stayed with him. That's the thing. So that's what I'm speaking to. I'm just bringing the nuance. That's all.
Yeah.
But I agree with you.
Yeah. I think we're, I'm sorry, just one last thing. I think we're in somewhat of the middle, but I think you're more so like the extreme, and I'm so more, yeah, I might be wrong. But I'm more so of like, okay, it could happen, like, okay, there's a middle. And if you want it to happen, I could give you the blueprint. But, I do hear you out, and you said that there are other nuances that go into it that needs to be considered. I definitely don't negate that at all, and definitely hear you out on what you're saying about that. But I do feel that it's a conversation that a lot of women that are looking to be married, if they only knew how they could possibly make it happen, if someone could actually, teach them some way of how it could possibly make it happen, maybe they would look at marriage a little different, and not feel like they have to come into it 50-50 as far as financially, being a provider of the household. I think that if we can have the conversation of showing them there is a way, instead of, no, it can't happen because he only make 40,000, so it's just not gonna happen.
So
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this is from something you had said earlier. When you were giving your example about your husband working 2-3 jobs and coming home and giving you the money because you're better with basically, I guess, the home economics. You said, I think you said something about he can't submit to you, but do you consider him giving you his money to then, like, is that him submitting to you or no? Like, do you guys submit to each other, or do you feel like it's just you submit to him?
No, I said that we submit to each other, and that's the part
Oh, you
of
would. Okay.
Yeah, that's the part of submission people don't talk about. And I gave Ephesians 5:2, where it does say that both should be submitting onto each other because it's a reverence unto Christ. So yes, we both submit onto each other. So I do submit onto him when there is something that I don't have more power in,
Right.
So yes.
But would you advocate for or think that there's no issues with a woman just completely submitting to a man, like regardless of that, like in the way of how like it's being spoken about these days?
No, absolutely not. That's toxic. Yes.
Right. So I feel like we're all in agreement then.
Absolutely not. And that's why I said that's also the problem, because women are submitting, not just our culture, but this generation is submitting to men. This generation is submitting to men that are not worthy of submitting, and submitting in the wrong way. Such, yes. So no, I would not promote that at all.
Okay. All right. So I'm sorry, sister.
Oh, no. Go ahead. You can go.
Oh, I was going to say, because I found the post that I was referring to where I got the, I guess, premise.
Okay, yeah. Wait just a moment, because I just want to I just want to say a couple things. So I am going to we put the StreamYard in the chat, and I do have a guest behind stage, so I'm gonna let the guest up in just a moment. So I think go ahead.
Around maybe like 10-15 minutes, I have to actually drop to do another show.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so what I was gonna say is just the conversation that was happening between Colette and Hanifa. One thing that I was really just thinking about is the whole concept of, I think we're saying here is being careful what we're actually sacrificing, and understanding that within, and with it being very nuanced, that means that a lot of people are not going to be able to do, like, I can't say that everybody's going to be able to live the way that I live, and just like each person on here is not going to be able to say that other people are going to be able to live the way they live. Years ago, when my husband was working 12-hour shifts, he didn't have a lot of, and that was one job. It was great money, but he didn't have a lot of time for the family because he worked those 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16-hour shifts. And then when he came home, what did he have to do? He had to sleep. And then it would start all back over again. And there was a time that my daughter, she's my oldest daughter, she was two, I think, maybe three. I can't remember how old she was. She would say, when is daddy gonna put us to bed? So, that's an effect that we don't really think about, we don't talk about, and that affects our children when, it's only there was a point when he was working, and he was working out of state. And I was a single mother. Like, yeah, we were a nuclear family. Yes, they knew what daddy was doing, but they were young. And it was like I was being a single mother. I wasn't working. I was taking care of them and everything, but I was a single mother because he was out of state. So, all of these things, we do talk about sacrifices, but we have to really be concerned of what we are actually sacrificing. Are we just sacrificing, materialistic things, or are we sacrificing things that really matter? Because those first few years of a child's life are extremely important, and that forms their ideas of their parents and the relationship and all of those things, and even how stressful we are, because when we're doing it by ourselves, that's a lot of stress. Single mothers are usually going to be more stressful than mothers who do have that husband at home. And if we're doing it by ourselves, even if we are married, we are going to be more stressful than someone who might be able to have more balance. And the other thing that I want to say is, are we saying submission? Like, I feel like we're giving this a name, we're giving it a word, and we're calling it submission, but that's not what we're talking about. I think we're talking about balance and using the word submission. So I think that is really what is happening right now, because when you look at the word submission, it's different from the word balance. So
if I could say something real quick to that, to what you just spoke to. I had a friend years ago. This is when I was a Christian, and she was married and then had her own salon and everything before she met her husband. They got married. She became a stay-at-home mother. He wasn't working like a number of jobs. He was just working long hours. Baby, I used to have to go help my sister out. She was burnt out. She was burnt out. I would have to go and give her a hand with the children. They consider, because she was Liberian, and a lot of some Africans in the country, they'll bring like a nanny in, depending on, if they have the money to do so. But they just didn't. So because they made a lot of sacrifices. One of the sacrifices that they decided to make is to not move. They just moved into her house that she owned at the time. Did he want to go and maybe buy a house together? Of course. But could they have done it at that time? I don't know. I haven't seen them in a while, but they couldn't do it at that time. So what I'm speaking to, and as you notice, I'm heavy on parenting. Mm-hmm. I'm very heavy on parenting. So the perspective I'm bringing to the conversation is, you cannot tell me that I'm going to send my husband, my significant other, out to work 4 jobs, right? And it doesn't affect my children. It does. Because parenting with 2 parents involved, with all hands on deck, a holistic approach is the best approach. There's no way around it. And so when you're talking about single mothers, the reason why I wanted to respond is because that's exactly what she said she felt like, a single mother. No one should feel like a single mother and be married. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what are you doing? You get what I'm saying? Right. And the last thing I'm going to say is,
when you talk about I like the fact that you pointed out we need to consider what's being sacrificed. It's not just the material, but what else is being sacrificed. You get what I'm saying? Because you end up with children who, it's like, okay, so I'm going to enter in the manosphere piece where they talk about men are too emasculated, right? There are men who come from two-parent household, they're on the softer side. Why do you think that is? Because their mother predominantly raised them.
Right.
That's a fact.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So when I say the nuance of the conversation, it's I just can't get with I could get with, and that's why I agree with Colette. If you got moved to another state where the cost of living is lower and all of the, yes, right? But I can't get with, well, if he got to work 2-3 jobs, then he needs to do that. I can't subscribe to that, because I know, and the reason why a lot of women can subscribe to that is because they agree with the idea of child rearing solely being the woman's responsibility. I don't believe that. So I am always going to disagree when it comes to that aspect of a man working and a woman staying at home. Yes, it can happen, but when he comes home, I need you to be there to tuck your children in, to read them a bedtime story, to help in the education of them if I'm homeschooling. All of these things matter. Your money, because I feel like in that situation, then we're just reducing men again to providers. And men are so much more than that. So that's why you see me feel so strongly, because I am a parenting educator. I am very passionate about parenting and the all hands on deck approach. We really need to rethink parenting in our community. Child rearing is not the sole responsibility of the woman. The man is absolutely necessary. So that's what I wanted to add to that. Hey, Rico.
Peace, Rico. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, ladies.
And before Rico speaks, I would like Awa, she wanted to read something because I know she has to go soon.
Yes.
I'm about to shake the table with this meme.
No. I was gonna I found the post that I was referring to that called Submission Slavery, and it's very short, so I just wanted to read it to you guys if you'll allow me. So it says, Black women who submit make the community more vulnerable than it already is. And then men who demand that they submit are even more cowardly. How can you look at another Black person and tell them to submit to you, knowing the negative connotation of that word in relation to our people? Black women should always be resisting, and we should encourage Black women to challenge this system. Submission is slavery, and if you support it, you're a neo-colonialist. We're a communal people, a cooperative people who value balance and complementarity. Patriarchy and matriarchy are European, so if you're imitating that BS, you're a explicit word. Create chaos for your enemies and organize with your people. So that is where I guess my stance on submission stands. I really wish I could stay longer. Thank you for having me. I'll definitely finish watching the rest of this later. It was really nice meeting and speaking with you guys today. Thank you.
Peace, Awa. Thank you for coming.
Wait, Colette, you still think my stance is extreme? Did you hear that?
I'm gonna make you that. I don't want to leave now. I have FOMO.
Yes. Yes, but I love it.
I'll see if you're still on when I get back. Thank you, guys.
Okay. All right. Peace.
Bye.
So, peace, Rico. What do you have for us? What do you think of submission?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to have an opportunity to come up here and speak among 3 beautiful, talented, intelligent, and gifted women. And actually 4, one just left. And just not to, I don't want Queen Hanifa to be too angry at me right away. But the young lady, she said that was a poem, correct?
No, that was it was a post that someone.
Oh, a post. Okay, I thought she said it was a poem, and I was like, it didn't sound very poetic. That's why I was like, that's kind of a weird poem. But okay. But I don't agree with the vast majority of it, like 80% of what she read. Some of it did have a ring of truth to it, some of the things that she said. And just as of lately, in the last couple of days, me and Arshawn, we were talking about the whole submission thing, why people are hung up and stuck up on it. And I started seeing people start to drop that reference to our people of the diaspora, why we're so hung up on submission, knowing what we've been through historically. And there's no denying that. If so it's like, I don't believe all of it, but I'm like, okay, I can take a sliver or two of it and say, well, it's a ring of truth to some of the stuff, because submission is something that historically has been beaten into us over centuries, for whatever, especially in America. Now, if you're from an immigrant community, you guys may have, but in America, and even when we got out of slavery here, it was replaced with Jim Crow, Reconstruction, segregation, just other forms of mental economic bondage, short of the chains and the whip. And I don't subscribe to the thought of submission. I subscribe to a thought of selflessness. So that's why submission is not anything that ever bothers me, because I think for me, my mother, she raised me to be a selfless man, to be in service of others. Not that I'm not in service of myself, because my mother was like that. We were dirt poor. She was a single mother with 5 kids and went out and adopted another child of a drug addicted streetwalker who left her baby with her one time. And so my mother, there would be times she barely had enough to feed us, and she's still trying to feed other people. That was what I was brought up with. And I grew up in a community where poor people looked out for each other, because we were all poor. We were all poor. So everybody in the neighborhood, but people always looked out for, when my mother had, she would do for other families. When other families had, they would do for us. And that's just a space where I feel more comfortable at. So when I look for a partner or a mate, it is critical to me that it's a selfless woman. I don't do selfish people at all. I run like hell from them, because it's just nothing positive. And that's why even when people are talking about got to get the bag, got to get that, there's a lot of characteristics and traits. And I'm not overly ambitious, because I know overly ambitious people they're pretty selfish. Me and Arshawn had a conversation earlier. I said, I never wanted to be a millionaire, because I never wanted to live the life of what I had to live to become a millionaire. You know what I'm saying? Millionaires have to sacrifice a lot. When I think about all the parts of my soul, my time, and all that, it was worth more than the money. So, I'm driven to take care of my family and take care of myself and live a comfortable life. But it's like, become a billionaire for what? What the hell am I going to do with all of it? I don't really need, and I think that that's a place where we sort of get at. So when we get into this whole world of submission, I'm like, find a person, a partner who matches with you, and you guys should be selfless towards one another. The submission is natural. It's not something that I should demand from a woman. You can't beat it in them. No more than I can make a dominant woman, a submissive woman. I can't make a submissive woman be dominant. If it's not in your nature, it's just not in your nature. I don't care how much I try to toughen you up. That's not what you want to be. And everybody's just not that way. But for me, it's like I want to find a partner, and I look for a selfless person, a woman who's selfless with her family, with her children, with her friends, and she'll be selfless and a measure of submissiveness to me. She's not going to be mean to me, and she's good to everybody else. But if I see somebody that's, and I don't knock them. If that's your thing, that's your thing. If you want to be driven and ambitious and all that, that's great. It's just not going to fit. I don't fit in that world, because I'm not going to match it. And that's just always been my spin on it. We've been talking about the last couple of days. I think in the manosphere and all these other spaces, guys are just repeating it. And I'm like, do you really even want a submissive? Do you really? And then if I'm with Hanifa and she's submissive to me, I don't even want that level of all that responsibility. As the man, I want to take on the responsibility. However, I know I do more things wrong than right. And if I'm telling her to hush, I'm in charge, then I'm like, no, Hanifa, honey, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? Because because as a man, I know what I'm not good at. Like I was told somebody last night, I'm horrible with money. My wife runs all the finances in my house. I was completely flat broke when I met my wife. Now I got a vacation home, money in the bank, save, because I never saved. I was horrible with money. So I'm not going to, I'm a big bad man, I'm gonna be in charge. That's just dumb. That's stupid. But that's their thing. I don't want to ramble on. It's my thought is I'm not into submissiveness, I'm into selflessness. And I just tell people, if you approach it
I think that's what we all agree on here earlier is the mutual submission, which is what you're talking about, that mutual submission where you looked for, what you were looking for was your reflection, you know, and you connected with someone that reflected those qualities that you hold dear, that you value within yourself. You found someone that matched that. And I agree with you. Find someone who matches, like I think Colette was talking about. She didn't use the word vet, but that's the word that most people use. Be better at vetting. Vetting is important because you want to make sure that you are in alignment with the person that you're connected with. And I think more of us just need to do that versus trying to get everyone else to do it the way we do it. Just find people that align with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what's also happening is, so we are not understanding, and I think Hanifa, she pointed that out earlier, is that we're not understanding those energies and that they're not particular to man, they're not particular to a woman. So it's the reflection. We're reflecting what everything is, like we're reflecting what nature is, we're reflecting what the divine is, we're reflecting what's happening in our body. So having a clear picture of what that actually is. So I'm going to share this and the divine feminine versus the divine masculine. So the traits of the divine masculine, we have logic, reason, action, firmness, survival, loyalty, adventurous, strength, and rationality. So even when we talk about that, let's see. So we have well, let me go to the next slide here. So so within the divine masculine is direct and projects outward with a decisive positive action. It secures, strengthens, and has a giving nature. So within divine masculine it gives, and then within the divine feminine receives. So that's the intuition, nurturing, healing, gentleness, expression, wisdom, patience, emotions, and flexibility. So it's cyclical, it's directed inward, it nurtures and assures, and has a receiving nature. So even when we talk about that, let's see, the femininity. So when we talk about femininity, it's more of the intuition. I think we confuse intuition, and we say, oh, well, if you have emotions, then you are overly feminine. But we're talking about the intuition, and intuition comes in different forms. And then the masculinity, we have logic. So a lot of times within that masculine energy, you're trying to explain yourself. You see a lot of times when a woman gets in, or any man or woman gets into an argument with someone who has a lot of masculine energy, and particularly men, sometimes they're using their logic to try to explain themselves out of situations or out of arguments. They look at rationalizations. We see that a lot of times, like, am I really hurting her or hurting this person by doing this action? That comes from a rationalization. So the divine feminine is what allows us to just be. It allows us to take our time with observations. It discovers from the inside by feeling wisdom, love, and freedom from within. And then the wounded feminine, or the feminine energy that's moving based on trauma, that's the feminine energy which is not in its full power, and it demonstrates desperation and neediness. And then on the other hand, we have the divine masculine. It is the action. So it's to take decisive action, but not aggressive or angry, despite what we might assume. Instead, it is based in open, loving, and deep sense of spiritual based action. It listens to the divine feminine's knowledge, receives her intuitive wisdom with openness, and then acts on that knowledge with confidence. This action is based in knowing that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. It is divine masculine that unites the world in love and personal authority. Let's see. And when it is, okay, I can't see hold on, y'all. Let me move this. Okay, so it is moving based on, when it's moving based on trauma, it perverts this by creating conflict with fear. It feels the need to prove a sense of worth due to feeling unworthy of inclusion or love. And so what we're experiencing right now on this planet is an imbalance between the masculine and feminine energies. We have leaned too far in the direction of the masculine energy and without enough feminine energy to balance it out. So we are fighting between the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine. And this is showing as unhealthy competition. And so, and some of this I did get from this article, if you want to read the whole article. And then, so could cultivating, this is my question to the panel and to everyone in the chat. Could cultivating more feminine energy into our individual selves help to alleviate the current dynamics in our relationships and community? So that question basically is saying, are we attracting women or men opposite of what you want because you have not actually cultivated that energy within? So when you say, I want someone submissive or I want a feminine energy type, is it more to the fact that you have not cultivated that energy within yourself? You have not cultivated that feminine energy within yourself. And if you are a woman, well, I'm just going to stick to that because since we're talking about submission. So do you think that that is the case, that a lot of men are have not cultivated that feminine energy? So they're saying, I want a submissive woman, but then they're like, all I'm getting are these masculine women. Anyone?
Oh,
I am not going first on this one.
I mean, I'll take a stab at it. I think partially it's true in that way, and I don't even think it's just. So first of all, let me ask you a question, Maya? Because when I read those two things, we say masculine and the mind automatically goes to male. We say feminine, and the mind automatically goes to women. But I'm like, no, the word is energy. Right. And I've heard other speakers say, and I've had reading that each of us have masculine and feminine energy within us. Right. So as men, we don't have all masculine energy. We have masculine and feminine energy. So I do think that, and I know even for myself, so for a lot of men, like we may have like more masculine than feminine, but we do have feminine energy. And depending on what we go through, we may repress it. We may push the more feminine down and try to just live in the masculine energy. And I think a lot of men have overcompensated that way for whatever reason, whether it's from childhood traumas. I know you guys were talking earlier with the emotion thing. And I come from an era where boys couldn't cry. You had to be tough, and then being from that era, and then a lot of us driven around poverty. So try being a crying boy in a poor neighborhood. They're going to pick on your tail nonstop. So you had to, you might have been more sensitive, but you had no place to express it growing up. I know in the neighborhoods, and no way in hell. probably from the age of 3. You couldn't express it as a boy because it was going to be the end of your existence forever. From within the house, from outside the house, there was no place of comfort for you to be because you were considered soft. And if you were considered soft, you were going to be a perpetual forever victim. So at an early age, you learn to stand up, buck up, and fight like hell. You're going to fight your way up out the ghetto. And most of us did. I mean, that's just, there was no other lane. There was nowhere else to go. And the people, some of the people who didn't, 50, 60 years later, they still there. That's why you see some of those people get caught in that trauma and can't get out of it because they can't either mentally, emotionally, and then eventually economically get themselves out of a space of poverty. And once you get out of a space of poverty, the world opens up to you and you see more options of how to deal with it. You start to see about mental health. You start to see about certain religious, venues and things like that. But when you're in that space of poverty, it's almost like another planet. You could be in some ghettos and hoods, and it's just like the world does not extend outside those borders. You never been anywhere. You never seen anything. You don't have, and it's probably a little bit better now with the internet. But when I was coming up, no internet, no, just that world was it. So do I think, and some women too, it's some hard women in those spaces too. There's some girls in those spaces just as hard, cold, devoid of emotion as boys. Do I think, and I just think about the poor community because that's where I came from. Yes, we need to. So for the first 20, 25 years of my life, I repressed all of the femininity that existed within me to survive. And then by the time I became 25, I went into the military, so on and so forth. That's not going to allow a lot of space for it to grow. And then by the time I got out of it, well, it's just, I ain't needed in these last 25, 30 years. I don't care. So I know for myself, I probably need to, because, like I said, the one emotion, like I said, most men are emotional. We're quick to anger. That's an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
That's an emotion. And then I know also, like I can be quick to anger, but when I love very deeply. So it's sort of like we have like maybe 2 or 3 emotions that we operate in all the time. We may have all the rest. I just ain't never felt no need to use them. But them other ones I use every day. I'm going to either wake up in love or I'm going to wake up the hell with the world. One or the other every day. And we swing wildly from one extreme to the other. Almost, I say we are emotionally bipolar. We're all over the place with it. But we don't have the range. We have them. We just, I guess, don't know how to tap into the range of emotions like you guys can, because you're probably brought up more in your femininity. So, I guess we need to find a way to access those emotions that are latent within us. And I think it would probably balance us out. I think some women do too, especially in America. I think some countries, culture plays a part in it too. Some countries, they're just more peaceful, respectful, and better. But America, I think, is one of like the worst countries in the world when it comes to, because we have we have a country that's just dog eat dog, and we think that's a cute thing about being America. We're the toughest. With this rugged independence, shit on each other. It's not as communal as it used to be. America has become pretty. I don't know a lot of communities where everybody's like this anymore. Everybody's like, neighbors don't talk to neighbors. People just talk about each other. They don't talk to each other. It's pretty crappy. The job is dog eat dog. I've even, I just know that that's kind of like what it is. So yeah, I think we all need to tap into the femininity a little bit more. But I don't know how we get guys to do it or how to eat. I don't even think we can get them to talk about it.
I think it more easily happens when you are in a relationship.
Yeah.
Or in more of a healthy relationship, because if you want that relationship to work, you have to start tapping in to those energies. Even as a woman, if you can't be overly feminine and have a conversation with a man, you have to understand, okay, they're speaking from a logical more of a logic place, like logical place, like and then you have to sometimes speak to their logic in order for them to get to even understand what you're even trying to say. And then also you have to kind of teach them like, hey, I don't need you to be logical right now. I need you to understand what I'm trying to express to you. And that comes from them cultivating their divine feminine. We have to stop looking at it as being negative on both sides. Because if we look at being masculine as women as being negative, and then men look at it as feminine being negative, but it's just the balancing of the two. But I think the men who are preaching about submission are the ones that are not trying to cultivate those energies, because they're probably most likely, a lot of them, not all of them, some of them are in relationships. But then I have to ask how healthy those relationships are, because when you have to constantly preach something, what is that saying about you? If I have to constantly tell my husband to treat me a certain way, then what is that like? What's going on there? So Colette, I see that you had something.
I had a question for Rico.
Mhm.
I wanted to know, I guess it's a two-part question, but the first one is, do you believe that men there's a term of men could be overly emotional?
Yes. Well, I don't know if they can. I don't know if they can be. I don't know if you can be overly emotional. I think you can be. You can overly be expressive with your emotions, because your emotions are your emotions. Whatever you feeling, you're feeling.
Mm.
You can't. I can't. I lose my mom. That feeling is there. Yes, I can cry. I can't be crying forever. And I can't be crying every time I think of her. And I can't be nonstop like I can't let go. But that feeling is still there. It's
Right.
never going to leave. Like I said, I lost my mom a year ago. That feeling's never, but I had to go through that process. I had to grieve in a normal period of time. Think about it on her birthdays. I think about it on a holiday. But I have to keep those emotions in check, especially as a man. I just can't. It's a saying that I always tell my sons: control your emotions before they control you. That's all it is. We all have them. And if you don't control them, they will control you, whether that be anger, the depression, because that's depression is born out of emotion. You some sort of traumatic event that affected you, made you feel away, and you can't let it go, and you just sink deeper and deeper and deeper into a state of despair.
Right.
But if you could just control those emotions, come to grip with it, and I'm like, everybody's differently, and you have to work your way out of that space.
Right.
Hopefully you have someone there. So
yeah, and I'm glad that you said that it was an action, because there's definitely a part where it needs to be a balance, not just on the men's side, but also women as well, and the fact that, okay, so let me ask you this: in the scenario I brought up earlier, if a man, loses his house, he has a family, loses his house, the lights are off, whatever, now they're homeless. Is there a certain point in time where it's like, okay, you cried the first day, you cried the second day, you cried the third day, like, what are we going to do now? And it not come off as, okay, well, you're being too emotional, you need to get out of your femininity. But it's more so of, is there a point in time, it's more so of, I'm looking towards you as the provider and the protector, so this is where I need you to step in now, but I'm giving you the time. Yeah.
In the situation you described, he better not shed a fucking tear.
Oh no!
No, he doesn't. No, I'm serious. He just doesn't get to do that. Period. Oh. He may want to. You better not shed a tear. You better start fixing that problem.
But shouldn't we still create that, as wives? Shouldn't we still create that space?
You cry. My wife can cry. I have to fix that problem. Mm-hmm. I have to fix that problem. I just can't. You just can't. You can't in certain scenarios. Like I said, people lose their job. I've lost my job before, and immediately the next day I had to start looking for a job, you know, and I'm like, I got severance. Oh, I got 6 months. I'm like, I'm not waiting no 6 months. Are you crazy? Are you nuts? No, the next day as a man, because even though I know I have emotions, I know how it makes me feel. What I never get to relinquish is my responsibility and my duty to provide and protect. I never get to release that. Not a single day of my life. I will release that when I close my eyes for good.
So is
I
that
constantly live in fear of failing at that responsibility every day. I'm succeeding like a mofo. I'm still scared tomorrow I'm gonna wake up and it was a damn dream and I didn't have the job and I wasn't able to provide. I live with that constant fear as a man because my wife, my kids, my family depend on me, and that's a failure I can't live with. I can't live with that failure as a man and call myself a man. So if that was to happen, I just have to start fixing it. And I know, okay, I may not, we in the shelter tonight, we might be in here for a while, but every single moment of that time, I have to be working on getting us out of that space. So no, I ain't got time to cry.
So,
you know,
so with you saying that you don't have the time to cry, right? Should we as women at least, if you wanted to cry, create that space for you?
You can understand how I feel bad, but I don't want you to let me cry. Ain't nobody crying. And my sons better not cry. I'm gonna choke them. I'm like, get your ass a job, dude. Did you know you don't have time to do that? You know, and I get the you can be, feel bad. I get that. I get you can feel that, but you can't be paralyzed to not try to fix what I consider almost like a life and death problem with having my family out on the street, especially if I got children.
Right.
Now, maybe I might give you a day if it's just me and you and we both adults. But, unless I broke my leg and got hit by a bus or something of that nature, but I just got fired? No. Now, if I got hit by a bus and I'm in a wheelchair, yeah, and that's what I look at, people in an accident, then yeah, you can, you got to give him space because he's in physical pain. And then that's the one thing that probably scares me too, is I never want to be physically incapacitated and to lose my independence and not be able to take care of myself. I think about things like that. People who, I've walked all my life. What would my life be like to be in a wheelchair? I don't think it would be the end, but I would probably go through a serious spell with that because I don't want to be dependent on anybody. Anyway, that spooks me. But I can imagine if you end up that way. So you do have, as a man, you do have spaces. Again, like I said, you can allow your man, if the loss of a child, the loss of a parent, the loss of a sibling, yeah, give him time to work through his grief period. Most other things outside of that, if he loses anybody in his immediate family, my guy, you good? Call me if you want to talk about anything. I'm here. I reach out to my friends, but especially as a man, I don't like to be overbearing anyway, because I hate it. Like when I lose my loved one, I hate when everybody start calling me. I'm trying to process and I'm trying to get over it. And everybody's trying to help me. And I'm like, you're not helping me. You're making it worse. You're making me think about them more when I'm trying to think about them less because of the pain. So I always look at it from like, just reach out, let them know you're there, and then just back off and let them come to you because it's just tough. But that, that's, like I said, in your scenario, he better not cry. You better get his ass to work. Sorry. You need to get out that homeless shelter, right?
Okay. And so I just think with that, do you not think that causes not being able to express, men being able to express their emotions though? Don't you think that causes something like within like discord within yourself, so not being able to express it? Can't you do both? Can't you have action? Can't you take action and express emotion at the same time?
Right. So that's a great way to put it, Maya. You can cry looking for a job. Yeah. We do that every day. But I mean, you just have to have that act. And I don't mean to sound cruel, or to make light of it, But I'm just basing it purely in the situation you're in, because sometimes you lose some, and then all of a sudden you develop a you like I say, you fall into despair. See, so you have to be careful too about becoming overly emotional, because like we say, people can get lost in that. Where it's like, okay, you give them 3 days, they want 33 days. You're like, what the hell? They got lost in it. So you got to be careful about, don't let them go too far in the deep end of the emotions. You be like, no, whoa, you baby, you going too far. You got to come back. And it may take you to shock them out of it, because some people, they will get into their feelings, and bye, you'll never see them again. And because then people get around them, and then they start to sympathizing with them. So now they've created this bubble of enablers where you got to understand what they're going through, and they're just getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's like, you talk to them about going to get counseling. I don't want to go. So now you don't even want to get help. So it's like, what do you do with that?
Can I say something?
Yes.
So there's a lot that was just said. I don't disagree. I agree. I think that the system that some people have called or labeled as patriarchy, and whether that's for lack of a better term, it is still a system within society which men hold all the power. That's just true, right? So we can call it patriarchy. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that patriarchy is just as damaging to men as it is to women. Because what you are talking about is exactly that, right? I think we're talking about emotion, for example. I approach everything balanced. It's not about, it's not to say, well, what about men? No. It's balance in the sense of the same way that, and I agree with you, Rico and Colette, where we talk about men reeling their emotions in. I actually think a lot of women needed to learn that as well, honestly. And I think that that comes from the masculine. I think a lot of us who grew up without fathers never learned to manage and regulate our own emotions. And we see it in how we deal with men. We see it in how we deal with each other. So the idea of controlling and managing and regulating emotion should not solely be assigned to men. Women need to learn to do that as well. Now, my job as a mother to my 2 boys, when they are upset, I will never tell my sons to stop crying. Why? They have fathers for that. My job as a mother is to make sure that they are comfortable in knowing that they do possess feminine traits within themselves, and to not be ashamed, right, of tapping into that when necessary. That you don't have to hide, you don't have to go in the shadows to do so. That's my job as a mother. The father comes in and shows them this overly emotional thing you guys are talking about. That is what fathers do. Fathers don't even have to actually physically do anything. They just need to be men, right? Fathers just show up as men, because children are watching and taking in and observing that. So boys are watching their fathers, right? And like, okay, this is how you handle this. And then they're also watching their mothers. So the issue around, I think women could be over emotional. Here's the thing. There's a safe space for women to do so, because we've assigned emotion to women. And so we have the monopoly on emotion. So men better not dare step on our toes and act feminine. Women lack emotional control as well. I see it all the time. When these women are putting a flat in men tires because they are mad, and they're keying their cars, and they're bleaching their clothes, and they're lighting their stuff on fire, that is a lack of emotional management and regulation.
So we talk so much, and this is the balanced approach I try to bring to these conversations, because patriarchy demands that we be very lopsided in our thinking. And as an African woman, I have to deal with that within myself very much so, because when I study my people, I understand that that is not who we are as a collective, as a people. That is not how we function within community. There is a cyclical function there, right? There is a communal kind of function. Yes, the woman naturally fall into certain roles, the men naturally fall into, but it doesn't make the men superior, and it doesn't make the woman inferior. It means that there is a very important thing that you are here to do, and there's a very important thing you, sir, are here to do. Do those things change? Yes, they do. It depends on what's going on. Rico, if you and I are married and your mother passed, whether you cry or not, me as a woman, I have to understand that there is something, a trauma, there's a grievance, because I do not get to decide how you go through the stages of grief. And let me be clear, grief is not just about death. Grief is about loss. So that man could have lost something else. Colette gave the example of a house. That is still a loss. He still deserves the right to grieve. Now, as a woman, what do I think my role is? My role is not to sit down and say, you've been, because Rico has the truth. I agree with you. Most men aren't sitting around and crying. They just aren't. And if they are still doing while they're crying. We understand that. But here's what I prefer. I actually wrote, I'd rather you emote than use substance. I'd rather you emote than use substance. So many of our men are drinking heavy because they cannot emote. They cannot explore the full spectrums of their emotions. They are addicted to substances just to stay afloat, just to function, just to not come off as soft. So the balance I'm bringing to the conversation is not to coddle men. It's not to say that men should just show up as weaklings. Okay. And it's sad that we even see femininity as weak. That's a problem in itself. So when whether a man shows femininity or a woman, we should never look at it as weak. We only call it weak because of the body it's being expressed from. It's the more masculine body. It's the male body. And it makes us uncomfortable. And I get it. We live in a system of patriarchy, and we are all affected by it. And it trickles into how we relate to each other. So what would I do if your mother passed and I know that you're grieving? And I know that you're not going to rest. I know that you're going to get up and you're going to keep moving, right? But then now I'm observing you, right? You staying out longer out the house. Okay, you visiting the casino a little bit more. Whatever that is, Rico, right? What do I do? Okay, what are the parts that he is usually doing that maybe I can pick up the slack on? I can never be too much of a woman to operate and build with my balance. It doesn't take anything away from my womanhood. That's not how this is supposed to work. So the balance that I'm introducing to the conversation, because I think we have very black and white conversations around masculinity and femininity, around submission, around relationships, marriage, all of leadership, who is supposed to lead. We have very black and white, left brain, right brain versus right brain, conversations. And I'm like, there could be a middle ground. And it can be healthy. It doesn't mean that I'm encouraging my man to be soft. It means that I'm encouraging my man to be human, especially Black men. Because if it's any place they should be able to do it is in the safety of their home and the safety of my presence as their woman. So, and I wrote down, yes, as Rico was talking, and Rico, this is no shade. Again, this is the system of patriarchy. All I could think about is, oh my God, the unhealthiness of it all. And the truth is, men know it's unhealthy, but they better not dare say it. Because patriarchy is under patriarchy, men are not. It's so funny. We have a weird type of way in how we treat men. So there's the submission part, because it's like, well, men are supposed to lead, right? But we snatch away their humanity. We dehumanize them in so many ways within that role. It's very interesting. I tell people all the time, we do not care about men like that. We do not care particularly about Black men. My man says that to me all the time. No one cares, which is what Rico is saying. No one cares. You better get up and go fill that application out. And that is how we treat our men as well. And I think it's dehumanizing. That's just how I feel about it. So it's a balance. It's not being extreme in any type of way. It's just me approaching it in a balanced way. Now, do I know that if I provide a space for my man to cry, that do I think he's gonna be there probably past 24 hours crying? Probably not. Because whether I like it or not, he do not feel safe to do so. And it's not because of me, it's the system that we exist in. There is no safety for men. And so what Rico talked about was depression, and I talked about suicide earlier. So many of our men are walking around. They have jobs, they're earning good money. Good money. They're good fathers. They're smiling, they're there for everyone, they're showing up, they're provided, and they are sad. And they are suicidal, and they have suicidal ideations. And if all I care about is that he provides and protect, I am going to miss it. I am going to miss it. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I would have never known. Of course you would have never known. There is no safe space for that to be known. Ain't no man coming to you and say, I had 5 episodes of suicidal ideations this week. Ain't no man coming to say that. Because that's seen as weak. And that's what I'm speaking to. I have to do the work on myself. Trust me, let me tell you guys, I'm going to leave it here. Let me give y'all an example. I never realized that I had an issue with this until one time my ex-husband was sick. It wasn't like hospital sick. It was just like flu. Y'all, by the time they took Kim, I was frustrated. I was like, okay, so when you gonna get over this flu? When you gonna get over this flu? I've had conversation with women, and my friend even had to admit, you know what I said to her? I said, when a guy is sickly, like if you have epilepsy or something, look at how women deal with men like that. Women see them as weak, and it's a sickness that is not even their fault. Mm-hmm. That is dehumanizing. And that's what I'm speaking to in this conversation. We have to make room for our men, to allow them to be human just like we are. That's all I am saying. I am very aware that the likelihood of it happening is very slim. Like Rico said, we ain't doing that. Okay? I'm very aware of that. I'm just saying, as women, let's not dehumanize our men. And we have to see it as that. My friend even agreed with me and said, you know what, you have a point. And she brought up an example of when she was dealing with a guy. And when he got sickly, and I was like, why do we deal with men like that? And we had to sit and process that and deal with that within ourselves. Because we are just as affected by patriarchy in multiple ways. Like our men, patriarchy harms all of us. So that's all I wanted to say to that.
Can I just interject one quick thing? Because Hanifa, it was something you said that just really blew me. Because and you're very true. And I have forgot about, like you said, women have a horrible time with controlling their emotions as well. And they do have that space where you can just be King Kong and tear the land up. And if you try to jack the woman up to shake some sense into her, now you got to fight her daddy, her brothers, and everybody who watched her act a fool and did nothing. They stood by and watched her tear your stuff up, and you bet not raise a finger to even try to stop her because of that space where we say it's okay. Now, when I say I speak to men, I'm talking particularly about Black men, and specifically my 5 Black sons, about controlling their emotions. Because I know the results of a Black man not in control of his emotion, he ends up either incarcerated or dead. A very, very, very high likelihood of one of those two things. And that's why I always speak. And it's unfortunate. I have to tell them we can't get out of control of our emotions, because one of those two things is probably going to happen, and I don't want that to happen to none of y'all. I just,
So it's not about emoting them. So
right. But I'm saying,
I was saying, so really the conversation is, it's not about emoting. It's not emoting. It's about learning to control your emotions.
Right. Not losing control of them is what I'm saying. When you get to anger and grief and frustration and you don't control those emotions, they will put us in a body bag, or 90% of prison are probably full of guys who lost emotional control and did something.
What does a man who has no control of his emotions look like?
Chaos.
No, what does it look like? Because you talk about go ahead, Colette.
No, I was just saying what came to mind was 50 Cent, the rapper. I'm serious. Like the way he deals with, I don't know if you guys know, but he has an older son.
Yeah.
And he deals with his son as if the son is like a piece of tick on his arm or something, or even he garbage on the bottom of his shoe, like honestly. And he talks about the son in the media. He talks about the mother of the child. He even goes on attack mode when other celebrities might say something about him, or other people might say something about him, to the point where he lost money over it. So that's going back to what Rico is saying. He was not in control of his emotion, but he was raised by a mom who was, I think she was a madam. So that's what comes to mind. That's what it looks like.
I didn't know that. Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Colette. You and your examples.
I don't know. I could give you, we can't talk about
that was good. I just didn't know what the information you just shared. I was like, no, I say you and your examples, because you said that's the best way for you to explain stuff, is to use examples. So I'm like, okay, I didn't know that about 50 cents. I think Rico, you talked about like men having like 3 settings.
Yeah. And my thing, for me, when I see a man out of control, I usually see chaos and a high level of irrationality, and that includes to go for myself. I mean, when I get angry, and rarely does it ever happen. Like you said, there's no gradually turning up the thermostat. It's just like because I've had suppressed it for so long, and even when I'm building up to it, it's building up inside, and then it explodes out. So then I may have taken something that didn't even need to be that way, and all of a sudden, because not knowing how to control it, and then I end up like, oh God, now I gotta go on this forever apology tour because I made a complete ass out of myself because I didn't know how to control it in the first place. Or I didn't, like you said, I didn't emote at a lower level, or I didn't go do something to get the stress or whatever off. And it's a lifelong thing. So even when you learn to control it, you can't take a day off. You got to keep practicing that shit, because you'll forget.
Think about what's the guy from Black Panther?
The one that passed?
Yeah. What was no.
Okay.
In the movie.
Oh, Michael B. Jordan?
No. What was his character? The one who they didn't know that he was a part of their kingdom. His dad, they killed his dad. Is it?
Yeah, that's Killmonger. Michael B. Jordan.
Killmonger comes to my mind when I think of a man that is over emotional. And the reason why I use him is because people see that as this alpha male person, and I don't see it that way. I'm just like, no, that was again, it's the character. In his character, he was a hurt boy trapped in an adult body. Right. And he lacked emotional regulation. Now he was military and stuff, so it looked like he was disciplined around his emotions. And I bring that up to say that even the way how we understand emotion being expressed, we actually need to expand our thinking around that. right? Because when I think about all the killings and stuff in some of our communities, that's a lot of emotional men that's doing that. It's a reality. I don't care about the tough exterior and all of that. Emotion doesn't just look like whining and crying and an elevated tone. And that only just, and I agree with Rico, irrationality, yes, but not only that, lack of emotional control looks like violence. It looks like violence, and we don't talk enough about that as it pertains to men. It looks like domination. It looks like you have to beat yourself on the chest and call yourself alpha all day, every day, because you're not really trying to convince us. You're trying to convince this soft little boy that's in your body. That's not for us. That's really for him, right? But that's an emotional man. It's just that our men only have about 3 settings, and anger is like a default. That is what they go to, period. You know what I'm saying? So emotional or feminine, I don't know how to say it, but being emotional isn't just about whining and crying, right? Being emotional looks like violence.
It's funny.
That brother, well, let me say this last thing. That brother that killed, I think it was it the 3 women in Baltimore?
Yeah. 2 women.
Lack of emotional control and regulation. So, yeah.
And I was going to say, it's funny when you mentioned the neighborhoods, because when you think about it, the majority of these shootings between these gangs and whatnot, at one point it started out over drugs, but now it's like over respect. So a word will trigger an emotional response. The majority of these killings now, it's not drug sales or anything like that. These gangs are shooting up and killing each other over, well, they said something about something, a slight, a disrespect. And you take someone's life. That's a lack of emotional control that could push you to take the life of another human being with no regard. It's crazy. And this is driven by men. But go ahead, Colette. I'm sorry.
Both of you guys kind of touched on it apart when you was talking about when Hanifa said it's like Killmonger is like he was a hurt boy, and Rico, when you were saying it's a learning to control the emotion, it's a lifelong lesson. What came to mind is with our sons, when they're younger, or even with our daughters as well, because I do this with both my kids. But when they get angry, and everyone here have kids, but when our kids get angry and they want to lash out in certain ways, or so what I would tell them, or if my son comes to me and he's just like so upset and he's crying or whatever, and he can't get his words out, tell him, okay, calm down, use your words. Use your words. And that's the thing that a lot of these young boys have not been able to, they were not able to, taught that. It was, okay, if they come to you and they're crying and they're upset and they lash out, it's just like, okay, go sit down over there, just be quiet, I don't want to see you. And it's like, from that young age, they do not understand to control the emotions, understand what are you feeling? Express to me, tell me, why are you feeling this way? What made you upset? So then, therefore, like Rico said, it's a lifelong lesson because they missed out on that part of where it was taught to them at a young age.
What's funny about that, we have to think about, there's a new generation of small children out there that are going through that, and they don't have a Colette or her Hanifa to create an intervention at an early age and say, okay, I got to get this under control now. So you got kids out there who are lashing out. They're being abusive to other children of their age. They're being abusive to animals, and they're not getting the necessary intervention. So that habit or that trait gets further reinforced to hurt, to lash out. When you're angry, to lash out, to hurt another person, to hurt anything, to break things. And by the time they get to a certain age of maybe early adolescence, because there has been no intervention, it's almost critical at that point. And it's like the chances of changing it then And Lord knows, don't let them end up in the foster care system then, where it's even less. I mean, it's some kids out there, and especially in our communities, that they scared the living hell out of me, but then it's kind of hard to blame it on the child, because if you grew up under those circumstances, some kids were lucky enough to either have the wherewithal just to say, okay, I'm just not going to go that route. Because my mother, of the 5 kids she had, I was the only one that even finished high school. So my 4 older siblings, they all fell off into that typical older brother in and out of jail, older sister in and out on drugs. And just for whatever, fortunately, they wasn't telling me not to, but I was just looking at their life and I was like, hell no, I don't want that. So that's how I ended up straying. But, my mother, other than her saying to go to school, she told all of us to go to school. None of my 3 older siblings listened. But I just watched their failures and all their struggles. And I was like, I certainly don't want to be that. And I just went the other way.
Ma'at, can I say this last thing? Because I know you're about to wrap up soon. I just wanted to say, as far as the children, because we were asking, like, how do we fix that? And I think that teaching the children, what I've learned in teaching children and working with them and choosing to do things maybe different from how you were taught, it actually allows you to parent yourself as well in some ways, right? So as you're teaching your child, you are also learning, right? Because if you want to teach your child not to be reactionary all the time, then when they cutting up, you also have to teach yourself how not to be reactionary as well. My 2-year-old, I tell him all the time, he'll get frustrated. He yells. No is his favorite word. And, oftentimes when he comes to me and he's like, he gets upset. And so instead of using his words, he'll be like, and pointing. So I'm like, what do you want? And I'm like, I'm not even moving until you use your words, right? It helps them build their vocabulary around their emotion as well. Because what I found is a lot of us, I like to say, are emotionally constipated, not necessarily because we want to be. Sometimes we don't have the vocabulary to express that particular. We feel it, but we don't even have the vocabulary to say, I am not mad, I am jealous. I am not mad, I am frustrated, right? So it's important, because my aunt was talking about words, teaching children the importance of words. Today, my son told me I got a little camera thing, right? And so he was like, you're going to do your show? He's 2. And I was like, yes. And then he see me fixing the camera. He's like, it's complicated? It's complicated? I did everything in my power not to bust out laughing, because that's the way I talk to my children, right? My 2-year-old says stuff like that. It's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. That's how he described things. So the way that we, the vocabulary we use around emotion is very important to the children, right? The other thing too, like Colette was saying, when my son started crying, like I said, I would never be like, stop crying. My 9-year-old, I usually say, okay, so what? And he's mad at me because it's something that I won't let him do, right? So he's mad, he's crying, he's frustrated. And I'm gonna be like, I'll say, well, what's the issue? And then there's a little hyperventilating that's going on, right? I mean, real theatrical, y'all, right? And so usually I would be like, okay, why don't you, I'm gonna leave you to yourself so that you can gather yourself, and then I'm going to come back. And when I come back, you need to be able to tell me what's happening. Why are you upset? And he's able to have the conversation and say, well, I don't understand why I can't be able to do this. I'm finished with my homework. That's what I need. I need you to be able to articulate what's bothering you, what you are feeling. Right. And that's teaching self-control as well. I've been teaching my children to take deep breaths since they were little babies. My 9-year-old been learning that since he was 1.
When you are upset, breathe. Okay, take deep breaths. And it helps him calm down. When he started school, I said, you know, when you get upset, you need to be able to breathe it out. The last thing I'm going to say is, I always teach especially my 9-year-old, your emotions are yours. Do not give up your power by allowing someone else to control them. Your emotions are yours. If you don't learn how to control them, then you will be controlled by them. And if you don't learn how to own them as your own, someone will come along and exploit them to their own benefit. I say this about people all the time with emotion. People to me who go from 0 to 1,000 like this. And I worked in foster care, so I dealt with a lot of children like this. And you learn very quick how to be a little stoic. So a teenager, I'm so serious, a teenager, you know, using bitch and whatever around me, it doesn't bother me, because I am trained to try to hear exactly what's being said and not how it's being said. And that translates into my parenting. We get so caught up in, did you just knock that thing off the table? Versus, why did you knock that thing off the table? You get what I'm saying? And then teach them a better way to handle that emotion the next time around. So it's all about teaching. If we want to change this and how men deal with emotions and how women deal with emotions, it starts with the children. And in doing so and teaching the children, we actually begin to teach ourselves what someone could not or may have failed to teach us.
So that's a lot of what you said. So I was letting y'all go because a lot of everything that y'all were saying were things that I definitely agree with when it comes to even how how me and my husband, we kind of balance the equation, because at one point I was I was annoyed, I guess that would be the word, because you know, men have a tendency to kind of be able to put the kids in place better than we do. So at one point I was kind of annoyed by that, but then I understand that I am the nurturer, right? Like, so you can come to me, you can cry to me, you can share your emotions, but then he is able to balance and put it in check. There are times we say, no, don't coddle him. You know, like he needs to learn this. But then there are times when, and my son just turned 3, so there are times when he does, I'm like, okay, let me be mama, right? Like, let me be mama bear. So and what I do notice within that, and just like you said, teaching them the words, there are times I have to tell him, use your words, tell me what you want, tell me what happened, you know, tell me what happened. And then also an understanding that it doesn't last long. You see a toddler, they cry, 5 seconds later they up running around playing. You know, so it's, and that's why, you know, we can learn a lot from toddlers because they don't even remember who they was mad at 5 minutes later. So that is something that we do have to learn, in just like bringing that balance in our emotion, cultivating the divine feminine, the divine masculine. So within our relationships, understanding what that looks like. So the question was, is submission balanced? Is it balanced? So I'm going off of the definition of submission. So my thought within that would be no. That's my answer would be no. We are wrapping up here. So what do y'all think?
Yeah, you're not gonna let go of that. You're not gonna let go of that definition. You're not even willing to open it up and add to it. You're not even willing to expand the definition. You're just locked in. I still go back to I think that it can be, if it's mutual submission. I think it can be balanced. I think it's all about how it's utilized in the relationship. If it's very one-sided, where only one person is expected to do it, then no, it is not balanced. But if it's if it's a relationship, the way that Rico described it, the way that Colette described it, which is, sometimes someone put in the comment section, we all submit in one form or the other, right? We all do. I submit to my children. Okay. And anyone that has a toddler, know damn well we submit.
Yep.
Okay. And they're like 2. Okay. At some point, it's like, okay, you might be doing something on your phone or something, and that child wants some attention. And so they're screaming and they're crying, right? Sometimes, because I've been practicing being present and in the moment a little bit more, and being a little bit more aware of when I'm not. So when that happens, it's like, okay, you want some attention. Mm-hmm. Let me put this down. That is submission. That is a form of submission, right? Because this is a child that is in need, right? Whose needs I need to now go and meet. So someone talked about we all submit to us to in some capacity. I agree with that. But since we're talking within relationships, if it's mutual, right, where it's like, okay, Rico described the selflessness versus using the word submission, I can rock with that. Because I actually think that creates a healthy relationship, because both people are going to submit to each other naturally. It's nothing to be discussed. There's nothing to talk about. There is no, you know what, sweetie? I just noticed these days you haven't really been submitting to me. There is no conversation about that. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, it's a conversation more so around you seem distracted. Okay, you seem a little distracted. You're not, I don't know. You don't rub my feet anymore. You don't greet me at the door when I come in. I mean, those are the conversations. There is no, why you're not submitting to me though?
Right.
What's up with you and your anti-submission, these days? There's no conversation around that. That shouldn't have to happen if there's a mutual respect and there is reciprocity. Submission without reciprocity is abuse. That's it. That's how I see it. Submission without reciprocity is abuse. It is one-sided. Only one person benefits from it. So if we go into it the way Rico described with and Colette described with the mutual submission, yes, there could be balance. With the way Rico described it, selflessness, yes, it could be balanced. So that's my thought around that. It can be. It's all how we utilize it. It's all how we deal with each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, not Enya.
I know. Did you see that?
Oh, because I said that on one of my lives, Colette. Enya, don't be regurgitating my stuff, okay?
Oh my gosh.
I said that on one of my lives. I was like, toddler is a narcissist. And Enya was like, oh my God, narcissist? Yes, I said it. I think that I think everyone who are toddlers or parents, we need our own support group, damn it.
Look at what Lover.
We can talk about them without judgment. That's all I'm saying.
Look at what Loverboy Linsky said. He said, shout out to all the toddlers.
They're demanding. My son will come into the room. He will take my computer. He will shut it and he will put it to the side and say, no, you're paying attention to me.
But it's funny because the way you describe it, Hanifa, I go back to, because for me, submission, the only way I come up with submission is there's a dominant force on the other side. So submission is unbalanced. And even in the situation of you saying you're toddler, I'm like, yeah, he's dominating your time and attention in that moment. So you are submitting to him and he's the dominant force for your time and your attention in that moment. And you are going to submit to him flat out. So that's why, and I think, like I said, even though men are always seeking submission, we repel at the thought of submission. Oh, it makes us cringe. And I even talked about how, like I said, it used to be a time, there used to be a submissive word in the workplace that they got rid of it. It used to be called a boss. Everybody used to be called a boss. They replaced that word with manager, supervisor, leader. No one's a boss anymore because people in the workspace feel subjugated to a boss. And you don't hear that term almost. I can't think of a job where they still use that term anymore. So even white patriarchy, that's why they changed it. They didn't change it for us. They changed it because them white men didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So because they don't, men, as much as we want women to accept that term and that role, we hate it. So even when we are submitting, you got to call it something else. You
Wait,
just
did
call it.
they change it, Rico? Because are you saying they changed it because the idea of being maybe submissive to like a other race or something?
No, I'm saying in the workforce. So like, when workplace laws over the years, so they started removing the term boss in jobs into other more less submissive terms. Because I read that somewhere. So it's like, the evolution of the work where we used to make children work in this country. You had kids that were working in factories and getting killed in machines and whatnot. So through the evolution of like labor laws over the time, they started even changing some of the terminology about things. So even they used to have like a lot of titles that were gender named. They even removed the gender names out of job description. And because it was just considered, okay, it's past this time. We need to be more progressive, and outrooted. So I always say that because I'm like, men act like, well, what's the problem? Why you can't submit? I'm like, because we got a problem with that word. We got a problem with it too. Don't act like you okay with it. Because as men, we have a problem with that term. And as I said yesterday, I'm like, do you care that she's calls herself a submissive, or that I don't care about what a thing is called if the thing is being the thing. So if the woman is being submissive, why do you care about saying I gotta lead? Maybe they just don't want to hear it because it's you submit at work, but you're not going to let them say I'm the boss and you submit. You ready to quit. You flat out be ready to quit because you don't like that term as a man and how it makes you feel. We're talking about emotions. So emotionally, you're going to reject and repel against that. So I just think that whole dynamic, that whole terminology, that's why I go with selflessness. And I know selflessness to mean in service of others. And so, my wife is in service to me. I'm in service to her. We can coexist in that way in a much better manner. And I don't feel like I'm her boss, and she don't have to feel like I'm her boss. And I don't feel like she's my boss, and I don't have to feel like that. Neither one of us feels like we're dominating the other. As I tell most men, the only place you should want to dominate is in the bedroom. And when you get about my age, you're going to start to lose that fight too. Okay, I'm just telling you. The older you get, I'm sorry, that's going to go too.
There's something that
we fail at a faster rate there than you guys do. We fall much sooner.
Get with my ad. Get with my ad for them herbs and stop playing.
But most men don't talk about it. But I'm like, that's gonna be your reality. You don't have to have the conversation. It's gonna come up one day. I promise you that. So that's just that whole dynamic. If it is a submission role, it's going to be unbalanced because one party is going to dominate the other no matter what. And as Colette said, if you want to call it mutual submission or mutual selflessness, it can be balanced. It's just a question of, do both parties, except for with your kids, because they never going to let it be balanced. And like you said, with the kids, they're always going to make it about them. They don't care about mama. They only care about them. They don't care about you. Which when I say I want my time, it's time for you to submit, mama, daddy, whatever the case may be. They don't care how you feel. So outside of that, with two adults, you can find a way, the terminology and the behavior, that you support each other equally. And I wouldn't want my spouse to be submissive and broken down, and she can't be of service to me because I've just constantly just overburdened her with too many demands and submitting all the time, even emotionally and mentally. It's not always physical. Because I'm just so demanding too much. That can be mentally and emotionally overbearing. And I don't also, the same way I tell men, you shouldn't have to take on everything. And then when that's not good for men, I delegate things to my wife and she delegate things to me. So when we delegate, we're asking the other person to take over the task. Finances, honey, can you do this? Because we're gonna We gonna be, as Colette said, in the homeless shelter listening to me, because I burn money. We gonna be homeless. We are.
And that you and that's what I spoke about before on my channel, that reciprocal exchange and that balance in the relationship, because there are some things that she's better at, and then there's some things that you're better at. And so I've said this before, just because that I take the lead on something doesn't mean that my husband's not participating, and just when he's taking the lead on it doesn't mean that he's not that I'm not participating. So we're still a team and we're still working together. But yeah, you're saying your wife is better with the finances. That doesn't mean that, I'm not there, with that. I'm making, you're saying that you're making the money and stuff like that. But it's a reciprocal exchange that is happening. It's a give and take. And when we say reciprocal exchange, that's what it is. It's a give and take. And so it's just like that when we talk about women having intuition, her intuition is helping you take action. And so that is very important in relationships. So when what we're talking about is just balance in the relationships. You can call it submission if you want to. It's a balancing act that we're doing. And so there are times when as women we do need to learn how to step back, right? Like we need, because even when you come from being a single mother or being around women who are single, you learn to kind of be the aggressor. Sometimes you're like, oh no, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And then also we're not taught to kind of sit back and watch. I have learned that my intuition works better when I sit back and watch, as opposed to always being in the forefront trying to do things, right? So I mean, and that's what I'd like to do. I like to sit back and watch. So if we learn the skills that we do have, and just what society tells us to do, society tells us to act in a certain way, but we need to act in the best way that is for our family. We have to be family oriented, family centered, as opposed to like, oh, you have this role, you're a man, so you have this role, you're a woman, so you have this role, but what's best for that family, what's best for that unit? And so I think that's very important to understand, not only as a woman, but as a man too, because most men will say, no, I'm in control of the money, but you're saying that's not my place. That's what my wife like thrives at. So I think this is a great conversation in understanding how we just have balance. Like if we could just say, if we could even just, you could do whatever you want with the word, right? I don't even think submissive has ever come up in my marriage, actually. We've been married for 14 years. My husband has never said you need to be submissive, but we have had conversations where it's like, okay, you need to do, I need more of this out of you, right? Like I need you to fall back a little bit because you're doing too much. We've had conversations like that. And then I've had conversations where I'm like, okay, I need you to not to always go into action mode. I need you to listen and understand my emotions and what I'm feeling right now. So I think all of that and understanding the balance of it and not always going into action and reactionary mode will help. So anybody else has any words of wisdom in getting to balance in our relationship?
I will just say one thing, and I guess for I don't know, I can't see it. I will say one thing, and that's because prior to this job I got now and I had for the last 4 years, previously to that, for like the 20 years prior, I had been in management. And I can tell you, you're going to have to read it for us, Colette.
I can't see it.
We can't see it. I'm sorry. But for those 20 years in management, I can tell you literally when I came home every day, the last thing on earth I wanted to be in charge of was any damn body or anything. When you're in management, that is extremely exhausting. And like the previous job I had, you ain't helping us. We're gonna lose our eyesight. I had like 35 people that worked for me, and they were all different ethnicities, nationalities, languages, and I hated that job. So if you have a job where you go in every day and I'm working 10, 11 hours a day and dealing with adult-like toddlers, they're narcissists and everything else, and when you come home, I would literally be crying and begging my wife to take charge because you're exhausted. So you can be sometimes so what I gather sometimes, like you said, the people who keep screaming about submission, they ain't even in relationships at all. And then some of the ones that are, I think most people, when you come home, I just wanted peace. That's all I wanted. I'm like, I do whatever you want to do. I don't care. I just want peace and quiet and just rest and refuge. And if you can give me that, I'm good. Mm-hmm. I'm good. That coming home, being the boss, I'm like, are you nuts? And I got to get up and go do this again tomorrow and deal with these crazy people out here who I despise and just suck all the life out. That's all the bossiness I got. I have to take to a place that's paying me. And I despise being the boss because I'm blamed for everything that goes wrong. No matter who did it, I'm getting my tail chewed out. So I tell people, be careful about that, because when you really have to take responsibility for everything, it can be exhausting. Mm-hmm. It really can. So I love having, I tell anybody, man, yeah, I have a partnership. So if something go wrong, we in this together. It ain't like, don't look at me. No, we did this together. So I'm like, hey, usually things at the house, so I let my wife run. She run it by me. Okay, unless it's something crazy that's gonna cause harm, I'm good. Go ahead and do it, honey. We good. You another sound decision, even if it's a little cuckoo, I'll throw my 2 cents in. Okay, well, when are we going on vacation? Where are we going? Let me think about it. I throw my 2 cents in. I'm not, usually it's places that we know we talked about anyway. So I'm like, go ahead, make the flight arrangements, get the hotels, whatever. We're good. And let me remind me, because I'll forget, so I can put in vacation so we can go. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be, they do this, do it. That's just dumb. I'm with the person I want to be with. She done went to a nice place where we want to go. What more could I want? Put them in charge. Let her have it. Why be hung up on, you need to submit to me and let me do all this? I'm tired. I got to get up and go deal with these crazy folks again tomorrow. So who wants the king takes a break. That's why they have like the right-hand man of the king, because when you're the king, they say heavy is the head that the crown rests upon. That's true. That shit is exhausting. You better share that. You share that authority. You share the responsibility. You share the burden. That's the beautiful thing of a marriage and a partnership. It can be shared. So we'll split the authority. We both in charge. We split the responsibility. Whatever goes right or wrong, we're in this together. And the burden, I'll always take on most of it as the man. But hey, if you can help me 25%, that's 25% I ain't got to do. And I'm good.
And that is something I think in this Western society, we minimalize peace and rest in our home. And so we do need to be each other's peace in each other's space. I hope I'm not saying your name wrong. Era Redeemed. I hope I'm saying that right. A boss, a leader, the head is just an understanding delegator, and also said pilot and co-pilot. And I definitely agree with that. Well, my husband was a manager for his old job. You could see the vast difference between the different management styles. People listened to him more and appreciated him more because of his management style. He was a person who listened to them. He also came from their position too. He wasn't just someone who just was like plopped in there as a manager. He came from that position and he was promoted. And so he understood their grievances and things. He listened to them. There was another manager who was not like that. He was kind of like, no, you're going to do it this way. Didn't understand the position, didn't understand. So he got more respect from them than the other manager. And the other manager, you would think, would get more respect because he was like, he was aggressive. But no, they didn't respect him. They did not like to see him come, right?
They feared him. They respected the husband. That's
right.
The difference.
It was fear, but it was also a lack of respect because of the way that he managed. So I think also that is something that we have to understand even in our homes. I don't want my children to fear me, just like my husband doesn't want me to fear him. It's like this fear that men are trying to have in their homes, and we as parents are trying to have with our children. You want to have harmony in your home, right? And there's one thing I want to share before we go, really quickly. It's the whole concept of helpmate and helpmeet. And I think that's where we get something, because we think of women as being like this helper. Y'all know I love Hanifa, don't get me, but I love my definitions. And so just I'm going to share this really quickly. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, I might not be able to share because I don't even see it. Okay, there it is. All right, so looking at the etymology of helpmeet, it was introduced in King James Bible in 1611. So as an helpmeet for him, now it was never meant for it to be a noun. It was actually, if I'm not mistaken, they said it was a two-word noun and adjective. But then in the 1670s, they turned it into a noun. So here it talks about how it actually, the closest word, because it's hard to translate words into English, it actually meant sustainer beside him. And then when you actually look at helpmate, it was actually saying that it was a companion. So I think a lot of times we use that definition. You hear a lot of men talking about their women being a helpmate or a helpmeet, and being like, oh, she's supposed to be helping me or whatever. But it's actually that person is meant to be a companion. And then even if you look at it, it's saying a sustainer, and actually what that means. And so I think we have to learn how to use the words that we're using and understanding the background of those words, but also understanding how we bring balance to the relationship and bring harmony. Like, that's important. Having a harmonious, reciprocal relationship, as opposed to using these words, because words end up progressing through the ages and having different meanings when they didn't mean those things in the first place. So that's all I wanted to say with that. But what, Hanifa, Colette, what wisdom do y'all have as far as are you still trying to show us something?
Smoke sessions?
What?
She loves submission.
I'm
I love
backwards.
submission.
Okay. I'm going the other way. Okay. Okay. I love submission. Okay.
Okay.
I know you guys think it's a cuss word. So I'm a cuss. I'm gonna keep cussing.
Nah, it's not.
No, I don't think submission is a cuss word.
Try selflessness. Let me hear you say it one time, Colette.
No. I can't.
No hable. No
Yeah.
hable.
All right. It's been fun. It's been fun.
Yeah.
It was a great conversation. Awesome conversation. And I completely agree with everything that you guys said. I think we all are on the same page. Sometimes we get hung up with words, but I think we're all on the same page, and definitely trying to make sure that, when I think about it, it's a lot of times when we find like-minded people like ourselves, we got to remember that we are the minority. We're not the majority of how we think, of a higher level thinking or wanting better for ourselves, our community, or our family. So I have to remember that in myself, and not. It goes back to what Hanifa was saying. Like, you got to remember that it's a lot of nuance that goes into things. So, with that said, it's enlightening, to have these conversations, but definitely not. A lot of things we say is definitely not something that is not possible, but there's a lot of nuance that go into it. And we have to also remember that we're our higher level of thinking is not the majority. But it was fun.
And that's why it's important to put this out in the world and in the universe and in the spaces of YouTube. So
Yes.
that we can we need to put that out there. I think Rico has said before, he said that people who are in happy relationships and marriages are not out here talking about their relationships because they're busy being happy, So, it's the people who are unhappy that are putting that information out there. There's a lot of information out there about marriages. They're just loud and wrong, right?
Yes.
So we do,
and it's not sexy. It's not interesting. You know what I mean? We're not going to end up on the shade room talking about all this stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. We will not. But I'm glad that Colette touched on, and we're doing last words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm glad that Colette touched on this because it's something that I have been really dealing with within myself the last couple of years. Is really, like, for example, I'm big on therapy, right? And so it's very easy for me to just throw it out there, like, get therapy, right? And understanding that conversation is a lot more nuanced. I want to say within the last 3 years, I really have learned how to embrace the gray, and not just approach everything in such a black and white way, and with such rigidity. I just try to stay away from it as much as I possibly can. But what helps me with that is to expose myself to people who are not like-minded, and not to constantly submit myself to echo chamber type environments. That's very important as far as expanding your knowledge and so forth. Just like today, we didn't agree completely on everything, but I agree with Colette. Which happens a lot in communication. A lot of it ends up being a matter of semantics and just which words we choose to describe what, oftentimes, and it ends up being miscommunication. So sometimes it's good to kind of walk through it and be like, wait, I think we're saying the same thing, and I had to learn how to do that. So even in these conversations, if I ever buck, I'm bucking against rigidity. I'm bucking against black and whiteness. I have an issue with that. I have an issue with that for Black people in this country, because our situation in this country it cannot be defined in such a black and white way. There's just too many factors involved. And so when we have the conversation, I'm like, okay, it's a very layered conversation, and we have to have it as such.
once we knock off one layer, okay, what's the next layer? We have to approach these conversations assuming that they're multi-layered just because of the people who are participating in them, which is Black people, right? And so that has helped me tremendously over the years. So the submission conversation, I mean, I was a Christian all of my 20s. This isn't anything new to me. I get it, you know, and I don't knock anyone who stands firmly on that. I know a lot of people who are still Christians, who stand firmly on that. There is no judgment there. So, and that's why it's very important. You know how hard it was for me to give up and to surrender defining things as just right and wrong all the time? That's difficult. That's difficult. And some things isn't always just right or wrong. Sometimes they just are. That's it. It just is. This person made this decision because these were the circumstances. And so they made that decision. Do you get what I'm saying? Under other circumstances, they may make a different decision. And it takes, and I'm still working on that within myself as well, because we like to see the world very black and white, very right or wrong, you know, very up, down, very left, right. That's just that binary way of thinking and approaching everything. And I'm working on myself with that because I just don't know that it's the most holistic approach. And that's, again, sorry, that's my opinion. So, but yeah, I appreciate this conversation. I love the push and pull. I love the different perspectives. I love the respect. I love the respect. That is important. We don't have to agree to respect each other. I appreciate Rico coming up as usual and always adding that male perspective, you know, and adding some nuance, even more nuance to it by entering, injecting the masculine aspect of it and the male perspective of it. And it's very interesting because Rico said, well, he has a partnership. And you know what, I was about to unmute my mic and say, oh boy, you about to be all sorts of simps because
right.
Rico had to submit to his wife hanging up a Christmas wreath in his office. So he's submitting, right? He's submitting, right, Rico?
I've heard so many men in YouTube be like, any man that talk about they're in a partnership, they're simp. And I'm just like, oh Lord, what are y'all doing? You know, to the point where our men are having issues with like Russell Wilson and stuff, with men who choose to treat their woman a certain type of way. Like, what are we doing? Right. What are we doing? Right. So I appreciate the conversation, Maat. Thank you for this topic. Thank you for this title. And as usual, if you ever need me, just let me know.
Thank you, sis. I know you were resting this week, but I'm so thankful that you did come and join this conversation.
I needed to get up. I'm still recovering. I could still, I'm sure you guys could tell a little bit. I just feel a little bit low energy. So I'm still recovering, but I needed to get up. And I have my show tomorrow as well. So I needed to start moving around. So thank you.
Okay, good. And Colette, thank you for coming and giving your different. I knew you were gonna have a different perspective, but that's great.
It was a setup.
It was not a setup.
I'm here for it. I brought my masculine energy, right?
And Rico, thank you so much for coming to the conversation, offering your perspective. You always give really good perspective, and I really enjoyed having you up here on the panel as well tonight. And shout out to Awa, who had to leave early. Shout out to you, sis. And everyone in the chat, Loverboy Linsky, Arshan, Jess DeWitt, Inya, everyone else I shouted out. Oh, Ara Redeemed. Everyone who just joined into the conversation tonight. If I didn't call your name, thank you for being here and being a part of the conversation. I really enjoyed tonight's conversation. And I just hope that we all are able to take something from tonight's conversation and continue to heal our community. So, all right, everyone, that is it. That is the show. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. And I'll see you next time. Peace, family.
Bye.